right, folks, I will call a meeting to order. Start by talking a little bit about meeting logistics. Anyone joining remotely, we would ask you to change your display on your computer screen to your first and last name. Anyone who speaks to the council, we'd ask you to start by stating your name and where you live. We ask you to keep all your comments or questions to under 3 minutes. If you're speaking about a specific agenda item, please keep your comments germane to the topic at hand. Anyone who wishes to speak must be called upon by the mayor. And again, you may make a statement or ask questions, but in any case, limited to 3 minutes. And if you go over time, discuss non-germane comments, go on too long, etc., you may be interrupted and asked to adjust your comments or behavior. And this is really an important point, because last time we did have someone who just refused to stop speaking when her time expired. And, you know, it's important for us all to be here to do the business of the city, and it's important for us to be able to hear from members of the public. But we can only do that realistically if we can have an ordered discussion, including an orderly conduct of our meetings. And so I ask everyone to respect our rules of procedure as we go forward. First item up is to approve the agenda. Is there any requested changes to the agenda? And we can then move to general business and appearance.
To pull an item off the consent agenda.
Sure.
Hold on, I can't see what my glasses. It's the Community Resilience and Mitigation Fund Elevation Project contracts.
Okay, sounds good. We'll do that. We'll get to that. General business and appearances. It's an opportunity for any member of the public to address the council on any topic that is not on tonight's agenda. And as with the other portions of the meeting, comments are limited to 2 minutes. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Tara Byrne.
Would you step up to the table? Yeah, sit there, and then and that way you can be picked up by the microphone.
This is my first time at a city council meeting. Thank you. My name is Tara Byrne. I'm a Montpelier resident and a mom of a 3 and a 5-year-old. And I reached out to a couple of you council members and you as well, Mayor McCullough, about an urgent issue happening in our city. I received an email from my kiddos' childcare program last week. They're called Turtle Island Children's Center. Now, for unfortunate reasons, they need to move out of their lovely home and find somewhere new. But for reasons I can't understand, they have to leave Montpelier. So as a Montpelier resident, I'm asking myself, what does that mean for the future of my family's welfare and our childcare needs? And I did some research, and I think you'll be shocked to hear this. If Turtle Island leave, there won't be any childcare program in the city, and I'm talking all-inclusive that accepts infants all the way through preschool kiddos ready for kindergarten. So I think that doesn't look good for the city and for Vermonters in terms of our priorities and where they stand with working families and early childhood education. I think the city needs safe spaces where little kids are welcome, and commuting out of town to find childcare reduces my ability to do my job and make money for my family and pay my taxes. So if I have to shorten my workday, I'm going to have less income. And if I have to extend my commute, I can't do things I love to do, like be a poll worker and volunteering with John every time there's an election. So I want to be an active community member, and I can't do all these things if I can't even get childcare for my kids. So I'm calling on City Council to take responsibility and find a way to save childcare in our city. I think the people at Turtle Island Children's Center are wonderful, but I don't think it's their job to save childcare as a system in a capital city. It's their job to nurture my kiddos and run a brilliant program and hopefully expand it, but it's not their job to counsel distressed parents, counsel distressed teachers who may be worried about the future of their job and become real estate pros finding new locations. It's too many jobs for them to take on. So I'm urging the council to start some sort of a task force. Maybe it's about early childhood education and help Turtle Island save the school, expand the program, and help open more childcare programs. If we call ourselves the state capital, we have to have the systems that every city needs to function and support its residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up. Yes. Either one of you fight it out. Sure, why don't you come on up? Come on up, Mark.
Get it all bundled together, right? Thank you for your time. I'm also a Montpelier resident. My name is Mark LaRosa. I am a parent of a child at Turtle Island, and I'm also the president of the board of directors of Turtle Island. So I just wanted to share quickly a little bit of the experience of being a parent and being a parent volunteer. I took on the role of being on the board and then the board president to offer help, to be supportive. And within the 7 months that I've been on the board, we entered a crisis situation where we had to find a new property. To move, we would have to move out of the property where we have been for 30 years, 30 plus years. What I have seen in this is not just the need for daycare. We already know about that. My son was on the waiting list for 1.5 years. We were very happy when he got in. We're very happy that he has been there at this wonderful school for so many years. But in addition, just the need for daycare, it's the difficulty of running the business, of how difficult the business it is. We have heard the reasons: high tuition for parents, low pay for teachers, and there's just no way to bring extra resources in. We are a private business that provides a public service. We have budgets that don't align necessarily with commercial rent, and we are now trying to find a property in a commercial rent atmosphere. And it has left us not exactly struggling. We think we have a plan, but it has been a very difficult road for the last 3 months. Montpelier doesn't need 1 Turtle Island. Montpelier needs 2 Turtle Islands or 3 Turtle Islands. We have the capacity. So what we should be here talking about is not how Turtle Island is hoping to stay in the city, how we should be in the city and another place should be opening. We have worked so hard, quadruple overtime, to find a new property. And it is pretty clear that we will probably have to move part, if not most, of our program out of town in order to keep it operational. That means for our current students and our current families and anybody who wants to join the program in the upcoming years. We think that we have a plan. We have a proposal we're going to present, and you'll see that in a few weeks, I guess, that could allow us to keep part of our program in the city. We will have to split our program to keep it operational at its current level. We hope that by doing that, we can maintain our program and give ourselves space to plan a true development and a true expansion sometime down the road in the next few years. But this is what it has taken to keep this place afloat. And we are a well-run, we have a well-financed for an early child education center. We have a group of teachers who would be the envy of any school anywhere, let alone a children's center. Oh, is that my 3 minutes?
Yep.
Okay. So if we are struggling, that tells me how hard would it be to open a new business. So I want everyone to know, I'll leave now, but
Thanks, Mark.
just so you know.
Is there anyone else here who's here to talk about Turtle Island right now? Because we might as well get you all together. Okay.
So my name is Phoebe Stone. I'm actually an East Montpelier resident, but I work at Turtle Island. And, following Tara and Mark, Mark mentioned that we have an idea for how we could stay in Montpelier, and that involves the 203 Country Club Road site. In the immediate future, in the short term, we have been starting to reach out about using the existing childcare space there that used to be Sweet Clover Nursery, to house a portion of our current, enrolled students. Probably around 20 to 30 kids. We currently have 70 children enrolled in our school, and we employ almost 30 people. So as everyone has said, like moving that out of Montpelier would be a huge loss. So in the short term, we'd like to work with the city to move in there, into that existing space. And then in the long term, we've been speaking with the hub and with Arnie from the rec department about how we could collaborate to really have build the thriving community as the city hopes to do in the future. So that's pretty much
Okay,
it.
thanks.
Hi, I'm Jocelyn York. I'm the executive director at Turtle Island. Phoebe's the associate director. She did that. She works there, but that is not remotely true. She keeps us completely afloat. But I am also a parent of a 3, 5, and 7-year-old, and I'm a Montpelier resident in District 2. And I bought a house well before I moved here. It took me 2 years to find a childcare spots for my kids. So we had to short-term rental our house in the hopes that at some point we could, jump and stop having rentals and move up. And we thought it was going to be just a quick stopgap, and it was 2 years of remotely trying to run an Airbnb while trying to get childcare. And the only reason I have it is because I run the school. I wouldn't have gotten a spot otherwise. I jumped the wait list because I had to have it to be able to do the job that I was being hired for. And this is not a strange situation for a family in Montpelier. There's over 1,000 spots needed just in this region. And I had come from the Brattleboro area before, and I thought that it was impacted there, but it's probably paradise compared to here as far as how many spots are needed. And that was really surprising to me. And so it is really, really heartbreaking and really stressful to think about the fact that we might have to take those spots out of this town and the city. There are so many people who rely on the amazing, unique bus system that we have in this city, that make it possible for people to get to work and get their children to school. We have teachers who rely on it. Many families rely on it. They will not, some people bike, they will not be able to get their kids to school if we leave the city. And as Tara said, many people, their commutes will become impossible. So I do hope that the city can take whatever way they can to really focus and create a way to do something for this, for not just Turtle Island, but for the city in general, to come up with some sort of a plan to lift up early childhood programming and help people get more going so that we don't have this crisis and that our workforce is more robust and there's just less stress in general here. So thank you.
Thanks. Before you step down, there may be other people, I'm not sure, but I completely agree with you on the importance. My granddaughter, one of my granddaughters goes there, and the other granddaughter used to go there. And it was very hard to get in. I'm curious, a number of the communications we received said that Turtle Island is the only childcare center in the city. And I was thinking, well, wait a minute, is there children's home and a family center, and there may be home-based programs too. I don't know, but
I haven't heard, I've never personally.
you're the person.
There's no other programs that are all inclusive from infant all the way through to the
Kindergarten.
older preschoolers.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So a teacher in the Montpelier, I have a 3-week-old, and she's like, where do I send my infant? So I think Turtle Island doing one that actually takes on infant.
Okay.
Program taking on older kiddos.
Because one of them starts at 6 months or something. Okay, thank you.
Oh, yeah, Family Center might, but yeah, we're also the largest.
Yeah,
location.
definitely.
So that might be more, people are saying there's nothing the same size.
It's a lot of spaces.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else here to talk about childcare? Sir, are you here to talk about childcare?
Yes,
Good, because I'm trying to cluster all those comments
Indirectly.
together.
my name is John Ray Hill, and I spoke to you last meeting, and we've been encouraged to talk to the Turtle Island, which we have done, talked to Mark and Phoebe twice, and it's been very productive to learn that they don't need the whole building, which is what we understood they did, which is a huge relief. So we had a chance to explain what the hub was thinking about and it sounds like our needs are very compatible. And it's been wonderful to have a chance to talk face to face and work out our needs. We may well produce a joint proposal if we have to go through the RFP process, which I'm not speaking out of turn, am I? We think it's been very productive to talk to Turtle Island. And unfortunately, maybe because the RFP has come out, we haven't been able to continue talking to the city administration and Josh and Arnie. We've had 3 meetings canceled. So it feels a little weird to have the city talking to Turtle Island. We're talking to Turtle Island, but we can't talk to the city until the RFP is done. And we're just wondering if there's a way we could make the same kind of progress that we started making with the administration, rather than kick it down the road a while. And you have to realize that I just got back from the cost estimator, and our $3 million project is now over 6 million, closer to 7 or 8. So time really does matter here.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have to raise more than twice as much money as we do to build our building. So a month here, a month there really does make a difference. And we're hoping that we can say Turtle Island and the hub are in accord. We think there's room for the city needs in the building. And ask you to consider if there's a way to keep communication open.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to that if I could. I think John is being accurate in what he says, but I want to be clear. The council had directed us in February to work with the hub to develop a joint plan with the city. Well, had he indicated that's what you wanted us to do?
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but that is not what we voted for. It was not my intention. So I don't want you to characterize it as we told you to work with the hub and work
That's what we
something out.
believed our direction was. If we got that wrong, then that's fine. I'm not actually saying it was a fault. I'm saying that we were sitting down with them, starting to work with them on a joint plan. So this wasn't a blame thing at all. It was just, that's what we were doing. And then when we clarified at the last meeting that we were going to put it out to RFP, we didn't feel it's appropriate for us to be working closely with one potential bidder. And so we have not really been working closely with Turtle Island either. I think some of the council members have, but the staff has been simply urging them to work with the hub, and we think that's been happening. And we've been encouraging them to submit a proposal. So I think I want to be clear, we're happy to talk to people. For us to be sitting down talking to one potential participant about here's how the city and your program are going to put together a joint proposal and not with the other, I think doesn't make a lot of sense. And, we've opened it up to the public. So there could potentially, I don't know of any other people that are interested, but there could be. And so we've just got to step back until the proposals are due, but we're happy to talk with anybody about the things. And yes, there have been some meetings canceled. It isn't entirely due to all the protocol. We are in a major transition right now. We are short a lot of staff. And we're prioritizing between a lot of things that we have going on. And working on a specific proposal with a vendor hasn't been as high a proposal as some of the other needs we have, frankly. And so, we're sorry about that, but that's just, we are in triage mode. And so that's it. So we're not turning our back on the hub. We're not favoring them. We're not favoring Turtle Island. We're not refusing to meet with anybody. We are allowing a process to play out as it ought to. And the bids are due a month from now, April 23rd. So our 2 meetings from now. And then the council will see what came in and how they want to do.
Thanks, Bill. Bill?
So would it be helpful to the staff if we attend the meetings when you cannot attend because of the other things? Is there any rule or legal restriction?
think the
about-
issue-
Just to keep the things moving, not only for this specific example, for other things.
Well, the meetings we were having were very specific about coming up with a plan for city rec facilities and the hub rec facilities to developing a plan. This is when we thought Turtle Island didn't need the site, and then we learned they did, and we brought it to the council's attention. So to continue to have planning meetings, whether it's anybody along those lines, is counterproductive to an RFP process. I think it's really healthy and fabulous that the hub and Turtle Island are talking and probably putting a joint proposal. We can help them on process and give them information and let them know those kind of things. I just don't think it's appropriate for us to be telling people how to put their proposal together when we're the ones that are asking. So I think, there's nothing illegal about it. It's just, I think we got a month and we'll see what we get and we'll make a decision. Hopefully it's a great one.
Thanks, Bill.
If I could, I know we usually don't do this, but we started it.
Yeah,
Thank you. My understanding was that Jim made a motion that led to meetings between the hub and the city. No RFP, no talk of an RFP. Then either Carrie or Lauren made a motion last meeting, I think, to produce an RFP, mainly, I think, because of Turtle Island. And now Turtle Island tells us that there's no conflict. They don't need the whole building. They're working with the hub. I don't see why send out an RFP by all means, but why not resume the conversations? Because the hub is working with a third party that the Turtle Island is not. So why hold up those discussions for a month when you started them without an RFP to begin with?
No, whatever you guys want.
because we directed the city to
trying to
do
get-
an RFP.
Right, we are the people that are asking for proposals. We own the property, so we're in a weird situation here. We've said, we want people to tell us how they should best use the property. But if you all want us to work with them to help the proposal and, if nobody else shows up, that's probably great. If somebody else does, then we've intervened in the process, but it's your call.
So Carrie and then Ben.
Yes. So, in my thinking, the whole idea of the RFP process was that it would be public, that it would be open to anybody, that it would be accessible, that it would be equitable. So it's really inequitable for conversations to happen because somebody who has a friend who told somebody something. So I'm glad that you stopped those conversations. I don't want those same kind of conversations to happen with Turtle Island. I think it's great that the hub and Turtle Island are talking to each other. The staff is available to answer any questions, provide information that they might need to come up with a proposal. But it's really, really crucial that we have an equitable process that is not just available for people who are in the know. So that's my big thinking about this, and I appreciate the way you're going about it. And then I just have to say one thing. I'm a huge Turtle Island fan. Both my kids went there. I used to work there. My son used to work there. Big fan of Turtle Island. Would love to see it stay. We do also have the family center and at least one home provider who provide infant care. So I just want to I don't want the family center to be slighted there or any of our home providers.
Thanks,
It's
Carrie.
clearly not enough.
Ben.
I just got to say, I just really agree with Carrie in terms of the RFP process being open and equitable and transparent. And but just on a personal level, I would just say, I think it's really a wonderful outcome that the hub and Turtle Island are talking, and be really wonderful to see a collaborative proposal put together.
Okay, thanks, folks. Mark, I'm just gonna move to, I think I'm gonna move to whoever the next person is seeking to be heard. Is there anyone else on the topic of childcare? So why don't you step up now?
Thanks. I appreciate this sort of disability accommodation. I wanted to start, my name is Tori Rodine. I live in Montpelier in District 2. I'm a retired social worker. I serve in the Montpelier Homelessness Task Force and also on the Affordable Housing and Homelessness Local Organizing Committee for Vermont Interfaith Action. And I'm here this evening because last week this is not officially on behalf of the Homelessness Task Force because we don't have a way to make decisions about this kind of thing between meetings. But at our last meeting, it occurred to everyone that the governor had vetoed the Budget Adjustment Act. He was explicit that he was vetoing it because it included a 3-month extension of the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program. Our concern is that what's happened in the meantime is that both houses of the legislature have approved a revision to the plan. I'm not clear if it's on the governor's desk yet, but it wasn't, I think, as of earlier today. There's a good likelihood he'll veto it again. The outcome of that is that somewhere between 600 and 1,200 people, including at least 160 children, will be put on the street on the 1st of April, which is, I think, less than a week from today. It occurred to me at our last task force meeting that the governor already knows that all of us who are out there in a kind of bleeding heart way, being advocates for various causes, are going to object to the veto, but that what he really needs to hear, since his only alternative plan is to give money to the cities and towns and have the cities and towns take over the life and death responsibility for our unhoused neighbors, that he needs to hear from the cities and towns because you're representing a very wide range of concerns and interests and very, very weighty responsibilities that a lot of the rest of us don't have to carry day to day. And you can tell him very clearly, this is not something the city can take on. The city of Montpelier cannot take on the life and death responsibility for every unhoused person here. Can't feed them, can't provide them with safe housing. In the case of this winter in Montpelier, can't keep them alive. And that's not a fair thing to ask a city or a town to do. And if Montpelier, which is really well resourced and really well organized and has a far better infrastructure than most of the cities in the state, can't do it, then certainly a town of 1,400 people or 800 people probably can't do it either. So what we were thinking at our last meeting is that would be great for the city council and the city manager and the city administration to agree to write a letter to the governor saying, we can't do this thing. And we're not going to do this thing. And it has to be a state responsibility.
Thanks,
In the
Sarah.
meantime, the city of Burlington,
I can
Yeah.
tell you, our lobbyist has been bringing that message to them.
great.
And I just received a letter yesterday on what the impact will
Yep.
be if this happens. And for the Barry District Office of what used to be called DSW, this would apply to 56 households, including 80 adults and 14 children.
Yep.
And it's just unacceptable.
Yeah,
So thank you.
you're welcome.
And it's still light out.
It is.
So-
Thank you very much. And I hope that you'll write a letter. Burlington has already done that. If you need a copy of it and you don't have one, I can send it to you to use for a model.
Yeah, if you could email it to me and Bill.
Happily.
that'd be great.
And Barry, I know, was meeting this afternoon to talk about doing something similar.
Great.
Thank you so much. And thanks
Thanks.
for all the work that all of you do on this issue, because I really am, every day, I'm impressed by how committed people on this council are to
Thanks, Tori.
the safety of our neighbors.
Steve.
I follow up something.
If you have 10 seconds, really, we're trying to, got it.
I don't know what your process is. I respect it. I respect equity, but there's a resource and we're gonna lose 70 spots of childcare in the city.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark. Steve.
I
I will overlap a little bit onto that topic. I do consider this an emergency. I like the recommendation that the count,
Name, please.
Steve Whitaker, Montpelier.
All of us up here know who you are.
Yeah.
Some people may not.
That's fine. Council should form a task force and create an emergency plan to avoid displacement of Turtle Island out of the city. On the other hand, I seriously question the appropriateness of Country Club Road, being that it involves displacing a shelter that's already there, that's that is insufficient capacity for the amount of unhoused people. It doesn't account for the traffic and congestion of the intersection, the lack of safety of the intersection with Route 2, nor does it anticipate coexistence with a bunch of construction traffic going up there to start building anything. So it might not be the best place for Turtle Island to relocate to. I do want to find a place for Turtle Island to flourish and expand, but I don't think Country Club Road is it right now. It raises all kinds of red flags. The lack of a traffic capacity analysis and kind of work backwards to what that intersection and what kind of traffic trip generation that parcel could accommodate would help in the design process. But I thought you were going to have something on the agenda for tonight's meeting of how are we going to get to the phase 2 done. You won't get it done in 6 weeks, especially if you haven't started it at tonight's meeting. That's the action that came out of last meeting, was to evolve the Country Club Road design into a master plan in 6 weeks. I think that's unrealistic, but I don't think White and Burke is the only, master planner for real estate. And I feel like this is a self-created problem with our own screwed up planning process in Montpelier. And now we've got a new reactive emergency to not lose critical childcare seats. So, but that should move to the front of the line. Parallel, we should be getting a master plan design firm underway with community engagement as laid out in the White and Burke plan, what we spent a lot of money on, and that recommended phase 2 design with a lot of public participation. So that went off the rails, and the attempts to cut corners and the number of false statements on our website that say that the plan was adopted and this is what we're moving forward, and the draft city plan that says the planning phase is over. That's just really unconscionable and reckless. Secondly, I want to protest your 3 minutes because you've got important stuff to hear tonight and you've had people run over, and I think you need to revisit that. It was created after the 2-minute arrest. But secondly, our construction project ripped open 30 feet of utility vault, concrete utility vault, punctured the 400 pair copper. There's fiber in there. Just the recklessness of not knowing where our utilities are. I don't even recall dig safe markings on the street. I may have missed it. It's violated dig safe when we did the chargers out behind those level 3 chargers.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Is there anybody else in the room who's looking to be recognized tonight?
I'm here representing Resurrection Baptist Church, so I'm not
Okay,
sure about.
you're on the agenda.
Yes, I'm on the agenda.
So, right. Zach.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, everybody. I'm Zach Hughes, District 3, Montpelier, and I'm encouraged with this collaboration with Turtle Island and the Hub. This is incredible stuff. I like it. I want to see more of this type of thing in the city, but that's not why I'm here speaking about it. I always thought Turtle Island was an actual island, but anyway, let's get down to business here. I at some point the city's going to want to, I know we're in transition right now, Bill, and I get that. I don't want to sound the wrong way, but at some point the council, the good news is the council, we're getting surveys about these committees and all these task forces right now. I received one this afternoon. I filled it out. One of the committees I saw that was still on there is the restroom committee, which seems to have been awash right now for various reasons. But when we're ready, I would like to bring it back and redesign it a little, or recommend some redesigns. I did write in some things to it. I think bathrooms are still a priority in the city, along with childcare. So I think we do need to have a restroom committee still. And I did mention a few things with task force as well, the homelessness task force on that as well. And I sent that out to our members in case we needed, in case they didn't get it from the city. But my point is, I'm hoping that we can, as soon as the transitions are complete and the triaging is reduced a little bit, that we can bring that committee back in some form. And lastly, I did put on the agenda for the next task force discussing, the same thing that Tori brought up around this idea of municipalities, having the money instead of the state. And I have concerns about that. And I also have concern about cities having that. And I also have concerns about S91 on the regional, a regional run situation with our caps. So again, it's all going to be about working together, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Zach. Anybody else? Or can we move on? All right. It is time to move to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda with the exclusion of items D?
I will move that, Jack. I just would like to take my name off the approval of the minutes of a meeting that I wasn't even on the council for. And I think the same is true for Ben. But I'll move the rest of the consent agenda.
Okay, is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item D.
Just 1 second while we're teeing up to talk about that. I just want to remind council members, I realize sometimes you just realize it now, but if you think you're going to pull something off, if we can know in advance, just to make sure we have the right people there or be prepared to answer questions, it's always really super helpful. I realize sometimes you only think of it now, but we do have the folks here, but just as general, that can help us help you better.
I knew it was going to get pulled, so
There you go.
I'm prepared. What I understand, you guys want Josh Drone, Planning Department. You want an update on the elevation projects. So if you recall, the state of Vermont awarded Montpelier $900,000 to elevate up to 3 structures. They limited the funds to $300,000 per structure. We got their grant agreement from that award in September. And then the next step was to secure a civil and structural engineering firm. So we used the DPW's statement of qualifications process to identify the top-rated civil and structural engineer firm, DeWolf and King, or DeWolf Engineering Associates in Montpelier here. We engaged them in a scope and fee discussion. And then came to an agreement. We executed that contract with them. I think it was in November or December. We then executed memorandums of understandings with the 3 property owners. So those have been executed. The next step was to secure architectural services to complete the design team that went along with the engineers. We created that request for proposal in January and issued that in January and received proposals. They were due back January 31st. We were ready to submit that for your consideration on February 12th. And then there were some concerns by the property owners. They wanted to discuss it. And so since that time, we've had several meetings to discuss their concerns around the cost, really. And so I worked with the architectural firm. We only got 2 proposals for one. And so the one that you have here, Stevens and Associates, is the one that the planning department was recommending. And I think you're all familiar with their work. And so I've been working with them to sort of adjust their scope to include the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing design, right? So that because of the state requirements, right, these projects need to be NFIP compliant, they need to be ASCE 24 compliant, which means like the whole structure needs to not crumble in the next flood, and all of the systems need to be watertight, right? That expertise is going to provide. And so we got an additional add-on scope of MEP services onto their proposal. And I think in the conversation with property owners, there was a question of whether or not the process could change, right? Because once we get the design team completed, they would do the foundation work, do the MEP designs, and then we would put it out to bid for a general contractor to work it in their queue. These projects have to get done before December 31st, 2026. That's the period of performance by the state of Vermont. And so I think there was some concern, at least with one property owner, that the cost of the contract and the timing wasn't going to work. And so that's why we had some additional conversations. And I think where we are now, at least, is I don't know if all of them have decided which path to go forward, the city identified plan, or wanting to manage the project themselves, which we have been amenable to discuss. I don't think that's what anybody else in the state is doing, although they've inquired, because they're just starting their own process. We are several months in front of them. And so we've been able to give them feedback on how they could restructure a similar process. So that's where we are today. I think my intention is to work with all the property owners to make sure that they're all comfortable with whatever process we go forward with. And that's whether that's the city hiring, securing architectural services, and then securing an elevation company, a general contractor to do their projects, or to have the flexibility for a property owner to take it over themselves so that they are more comfortable with the timing aspect and the cost.
So to be clear, so we've got 3 separate contracts up for approval tonight for each of the properties. Is that how
It's actually just one contract. The engineering was actually 6 different contracts because it was structural and civil for each property, but this would just be one contract.
And if the council approves this, does this lock any of the homeowners into going down this way, or do they still have the flexibility of?
Well, to be clear, I think the wording in the action item was for you to give us the ability to approve a contract, because again, there's still some uncertainty from at least one property owner about whether or not they want to participate in our process. So the contract that I have from Stevens and Associates is to do 3 sites. If they reduce that to 2 sites, I think I put that in the action item, the contract would be reduced, I think, by about $12,000, I think.
I see in the agenda that maybe I'm missing this, but I see that there's 4 action item like cover sheets. And it says supporting documents, there's a proposal, but I don't see any additional information in the packet. Am I missing something? Do you guys see anything?
No, I see an action item approved contract is the recommended action for 4 different items here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I sent a contract to be uploaded with the packet, but
I don't see a contract.
yeah, I don't do that. So If I didn't send it to get uploaded, then that's my bad.
Would it be a problem if we say, well, we really think we need to see the contract, so we should take it up next meeting?
Is it a problem? I mean, it's not a problem. It's just, it would extend the process out
2 more weeks.
further to where it's been extended 2 months from when it should have been originally considered. So I'm happy to discuss the contract with you, and identify the price.
Okay, Carrie.
So my understanding from reading this was that you asked the property owner who's considering managing themselves to tell you by some point this week, maybe by the end of this week. And so if we were to wait until the next council meeting, then you would know for sure, and you'd be able to give us actual numbers in the contract. You'd be able to have a contract that says, this is what we're doing. And then you could also, if this only for 2 properties, you could give us more information about what's going to happen with the money that's allocated for that 3rd property.
Is everybody just realizing now during the council meeting that there was no contract in your packet that was given to you on Friday?
I think that's the case.
Oh, okay.
All right, folks, what do you say we push this to the next meeting?
Definitely send it.
Just forward it to them.
I don't mind sitting up here for hours if we can get it done today, you know?
Via email?
Yeah, just now. From Josh, I forwarded, it was to us, our team. So I don't know.
Huh.
Show up sooner or later.
Yep, I have 4 attachments right here. Sorry, Jim?
There's the cover letter, an action item, and the elevation contract all attached.
So folks.
What are we
what's-
doing right now? We're waiting
what-
for a
what's your-
contract to review.
What's your pleasure here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry, Josh, like, I think it's tough to approve a contract that we haven't read. And I understand the urgency of the timeline here, and I think, I hope that we can make up the time, but I personally would really want the time to read it.
You maybe set up a special meeting just for this, like a Zoom meeting just for this contract.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I would be happy to do that, make time for
We
this.
can schedule that.
And if I could just say one other thing too, I appreciate that this is really like, this kind of elevation program is really unusual, right? I mean, and hopefully it remains unusual. It's challenging. I think, the first time for the city to do it in a long time. I really appreciate the hard work that you have put into it. And I also just appreciate the residents who have to deal with this kind of uncertainty and how traumatic this entire experience has been. And I just, my hope would be that, that I would love to see it continue to be a collaborative process as opposed to somebody feeling the need to break off. I think these are public funds coming from the state, and we have a responsibility as a city to help ensure that they're used well. And I think also just these folks shouldn't be on their own, and they haven't been. You've been with them, and I would just like to see that kind of collaboration continue. And we need to step up too. And if that means like having another meeting to make sure we can approve the contract that we've read, I think we need to do that. So I just want to thank you and hope that the collaboration can continue, and that maybe that means like regular check-ins, but however we can be helpful.
Let's take this, talk about scheduling before we adjourn tonight.
I was just gonna suggest sometime on Monday, should be, we could do a 5-minute.
Yeah, I was thinking Monday or even Friday,
Fridays the
but,
time to warn it,
but yeah. Okay,
get everything posted. So. just do it. We'll send something out tomorrow with the schedule, but.
All right.
great.
Well, thanks for the flexibility to get something done sooner.
Thank you.
Thanks, Josh. Item number 6, GMT route update.
Hi, good evening. Christian Meyer. I'm the Director of Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission. I'm here tonight as the Washington County representative to the GMT Board of Commissioners. I have 2 items I just wanted to give the council an update on. One is proposed revisions to the MyRide transit service here in Montpelier, the on-demand transit service, which essentially gives us all door-to-door service. These adjustments are being precipitated based on the closing of the grant that funded that pilot. V-Trans has requested to Green Mountain Transit to study the issue and bring proposals. They've put forth 2 options. One would return to a full fixed route service. And the second would create a hybrid where the Hospital Hill route up to the mall, the hospital, and Berlin Plateau would be fixed route with then a circular on-demand service available in the downtown. There'll be public meetings on these 2 options next week, April 2nd, in person at Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission offices, 4:30 to 5:30, and a virtual meeting on April 3rd at 12 p.m. The second item I wanted to bring up was a potential transfer of service or operations from Green Mountain Transit to most likely an adjacent provider like Tri-Valley Transit, which is active in Addison County and parts of Windsor and Orange County. There have been no decisions on this, and certainly as it progresses, I hope that the opportunity would be made available to the council to meet with the new general manager if the service goes forward. Right now, both organizations have said they're open to talking, open to recommendations as they come forward from either the legislature or V-Trans directly. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I also could provide a brief memo to you on what I spoke about tonight. I didn't get it in the packet in time, but I'm happy to let you guys pass it around.
Thanks. Folks, anyone have any questions?
Memo? Yes, no?
I'm sorry, I do have one. Yeah,
Okay.
I would actually appreciate the memo,
Yeah.
particularly on the difference between returning to the fixed route and the hybrid with MyRide. Like I would just, if to the degree that you're able to provide some nuance or context on that, it'd be helpful. And I'm happy to take it in writing.
Yeah, if I didn't say it, one thing I want to stress is as GMT approached these adjustments, the goal was to maintain the service area to the same space, the geography as it's currently available. And with only minor adjustments, they've been able to do that through deviations, which means you could call in and request a route be deviated to your address. Just as when you are returning, you would have to request to the bus driver. It's an extra step, but it would still provide some level of service to that same service area, even without the MyRide option. I don't cover that in the memo, but I can also get more information from GMT in advance of those public meetings next week.
Christian, is this the memo dated March 24th to Montpelier City Council?
That's the one. You did get it?
We got that last night.
Excellent.
Thank you.
There is a map at the back of that memo that shows current MyRide service area overlaid with the it's overlaid on the MyRide fixed route hybrid map. So you do see a dotted line around the edge that can compare them. Yeah.
I'm sure there are people who are going to be glad to see the return of the Hospital Hill service.
Sure. And again, I'm always here available to bring messages from the council or the city back to the Board of Commissioners of Green Mountain Transit. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Steve, are you seeking to be recognized on this point?
Yes,
Okay.
Steve Whitaker, Montpelier. I want to quit hearing that distraction. Now would be an opportune time for the council to heed my recommendation made over several years that we renegotiate, invoke the terms and renegotiate the terms of our lease of our transit center first floor. If there's going to be a new operator coming in, that we give that space with 2-3 bathrooms and private break space and private ticket counter, et cetera, for $1 a year. And that's not fair. And if the new operator is going to come in, that is ideal spot for, in fact, we originally represented to the federal government that it was going to be a tourist information center. We fumbled that. And it's still not a tourist information center. But the housing and the bathroom emergency necessitates that we take greater control of that space and use those 2 outward-facing public bathrooms even round the clock. They have electric locks that could be remotely triggered with video. There's plenty of video surveillance there, so people could ask for evening access to the bathroom, and a dispatcher could let them in. There's no rocket science to this other that we have a motorized door that's never worked on the Taylor Street side. But my point is now would be the time that contract was manipulated by Fraser repeatedly to sell us short, throw us under the bus. And we are the citizens of Montpelier and we own that building and we've been selling it short. And it's time to reset that with the new operator coming in and trading the value of whatever space they do require, probably the break room, maybe the ticket counter, for extension of the My Ride. My Ride is valuable. I think a better word would be detour rather than deviant, because I know people who use it and they don't want to be called deviants. But thank you.
Next up, we have item 7, FEMA acquisition request from Resurrection Baptist Church.
Josh Jerome, Planning Department.
David Book, resident of Worcester, moderator of Resurrection Baptist Church.
So as you know, in your action item, Resurrection Baptist Church located at 144 Elm Street experienced pretty significant flooding in July 2023. The basement was completely filled. They got about 10 inches of water onto the first floor. And I think you had a whole army of people from around the country come and, help clean out, try to get the structure prepared for winter. And then, unfortunately, weatherization was not effective. And there were some pipes that burst, and some additional damage was caused in the structure during that time. And so, I think they've been working with VEM throughout the last year, and then us to request a buyout. And every buyout situation is challenging. And so as we've looked at this particular location and the structure, the planning department looked at how much water they got, where the location is in the floodplain, the lot size, about 1.3 acres, parking lot. We determined that because they would also have to pass a benefit cost analysis with VEM to qualify for the buyout, and it really didn't seem that was possible given the damage sustained because of the failed weatherization, that planning department looked at this site as being a site that could be redeveloped. It is walkable to the downtown. It's a fairly large lot. Obviously the public services are already there. And so we are recommending to not approve a buyout. But I'm sure David would want to discuss, why they should have a buyout.
Thank you, Josh. I'd like to say a few things just to flesh out a little bit of what is stated in the statement that you have, that Josh has alluded to. There's some clarification I think that I would like to make. First of all, let me say quickly that this church was organized in 1976. It's been at its present location since that particular date. Now, it is the only Baptist church in Montpelier. It has been very active in community activities, being a founding group who put together the idea called now the Good Samaritan Haven. And moi was actually the founding director of the Haven. I served at the Haven as the director for 10 years, the first 10 years of its organization. And we continue to be supportive of community activities and concerns. There are 4 specific things I want to address quickly. I'll be as quickly as I can because I want you to get the full picture here. Josh has alluded to an engineer's report that states for his interpretation that there was not substantial damage done to the building. And I would say to you that you need to read the entire report because you come across such statements as restoring the structure to pre-flood condition will require considerable funding. Ideally, the exterior faces of the foundation should be excavated and parged or shortcreted where possible, but at least at the south and east walls. This type of work is costly because hand shoveling is required to some extent because of utilities, and since an excavator can only come so close to the foundation without dislodging stones. It is true that nowhere in the engineer's report does it say specifically there is no substantial damage, but neither does it say anywhere in the report that there is substantial damage. Secondly, the oil heating system was totally ruined because it was in the basement. So that heating system that burst essentially was going to be removed anyway. Yes, there was some additional damage, obviously, not widespread though. We would have had to remove the radiator systems anyway. So that particular item, I think, can be appreciated. The other thing to say in that regard is that we tried so hard to get contractors and people to come in and help us after the initial wave of volunteers left. They didn't want to fool with little old Resurrection Baptist Church, basically. They wanted to get the big jobs, and that's where they went. We called numerous people to try to satisfy our desire to have it winterized the way it should have been. We could not find a single plumber who was willing to come in and blow it all out. So we did the best we could. It wasn't good enough. We admit that. It's also stated that there was no idea, no surety anyway, of where we got the information for the damages. And I don't quite understand that. That information was given to FEMA. All of that information, the damage estimate came from licensed plumbers, electricians, contractors. I have the names and would be happy to share them with Josh if he so needs. And finally, the parking lot is under lease. The lease runs out this coming year. It is leased by the, help me here.
It's down the street.
Yeah, down street. And I think I read, I couldn't find it this afternoon, I was looking for it. I think I read somewhere that the greenness of that property, which has to be retained if it is bought out and demolished, will accept a parking lot, unimproved parking lot. So if the city needs more parking, that whole area could be used for parking. We have 21 spaces that are leased now. And I can easily think that you could have a 45 space area there. Just so you know, Resurrection Baptist Church still is in existence. It meets regularly every Sunday. It has not missed a Sunday in almost 2 years since the flood. And we actually have grown since the flood. And I'm very excited about that, obviously. And it is our intention to return to, we're meeting now out in a location, the old Seventh-day Adventist School in Berlin on Vine Street. We intend to return to downtown Montpelier. We feel that Montpelier is our mission. It's our goal. We don't want to leave Montpelier. We're not about to fold. After we have been through what we have been through in the last 3 or 4 years, ain't nobody going to move us out of Montpelier. I guarantee you. The devil is not going to have his way in that regard. We certainly know that, I'm not sure how the finances work on a buyout, but we certainly are not expecting to receive the value of the property before it was flooded. We'll be happy to settle for a buyout that's far less than that. So that's all I've got to say. I do want to say one thing other than that. I really, and this is going to sound strange. It's different. We've had nothing but cooperation from FEMA, the state, and from Josh's department. I appreciate that. We came in a little late for some reasons that are not necessary to explain, but we really have had good communication until this week. I tried to reach our manager. Phone's been disconnected. He doesn't answer emails. He may have gotten canned. I don't know. Do you know? His name is Charles Williams.
At FEMA?
From FEMA.
No, I don't know.
Okay. Very unlike him not to respond. Thank you.
Yeah. Just to confirm, that is correct. When FEMA goes through a buyout process, that, the parcel is to be green space in perpetuity, but it can be used for a parking lot or public restroom.
And if it becomes a parking lot, I assume it can't be paved.
No, it cannot. Just crushed stone, gravel.
We understand that too.
And that's not considered impervious surface?
Well, technically, I think it is in our case and how Montpelier looks at it, but I think there's a way to do it that you can mitigate that runoff.
And Josh, am I right in thinking that part of the confusion or misunderstanding here might be between what an ordinary person would look at a structure and say, well, that's clearly substantial damage, and how FEMA assesses substantial damage to meet their definitions?
Yeah, so, and maybe
Mike, do you have your answer to that?
Oh, Mike Miller, Planning Director. So by definition, historic structures cannot be substantially damaged.
And that counts as.
And their building is historic. So even if it has $800,000 worth of damage to an $800,000 building, under the rules, it's not substantially damaged. So that's why they don't get that first trigger that other buyouts that we've talked about have had, was that they're not technically substantially damaged.
And we've had some other buildings in the city that have been like that too, right?
Yes.
But are there not avenues set up to avoid that historical designation?
That would be a much bigger process that you'd have to work with the state to go through to decertify the building. And usually that's going to require something that would say that it should not have been certified in the first place, or have something to that effect. But that gets outside of my expertise in that field of how things get determined. But
And to zip to the main question, the main reason that your department doesn't think it's appropriate for buyout is because you think there are other uses other than bare space that could be put on that land?
Yeah, we factored in a couple of aspects, one of which is, it's not on the riverside, it is on the uphill side of Elm Street. And it's a parcel of 1.3 acres in size. So we would have to permanently conserve that space in perpetuity. And looking at that space in our downtown, looking at the need for housing, this would be a prime space for somebody to come in and demolish the building and put in, a 1.3 acres. I mean, you could put a lot of housing on 1.3 acres in a district that has no density requirements. So, I mean, it's.
Thanks, Mike. Carrie. I thought I said, okay, Sal.
Mike, on the image that shows the property lines, it includes a forested area that heads up the hill towards the park. Is that, I mean, I'm trying to remember, how steep is that? I mean, is that at all developable, or are you talking about just
Yeah,
the
no,
flat
the
portion?
steep slope certainly wouldn't be. I don't know how big the flat usable portion of the site is, but it's a decent.
I think the document says there's 13,000 square feet that could be developed, I think.
And how far below the DFE is that,
Well, if they got 10 inches into their first floor, then you're probably looking at, it's going to be 2 feet above that 10-inch into the first floor. So you're probably talking
5 feet off the ground, something like that?
Yeah, probably 5 feet off the ground is what the requirement would be. Yeah.
Above or something.
Yep.
I think it's actually, I think it's less than that. The elevation line 524 kind of goes right through the building. And 525 kind of touches the back corner, and base flood elevation right there is 525.5, I believe. So
the grade is heading up toward the whole side and the back, yeah.
Yep.
A complicating thing is that building is built in two phases. The old house was built in about 1870. And then in 1960, there was an addition. The addition has the sanctuary and also just has a crawl space, does not have a basement underneath, but it's in two different sections.
Thanks. Any other questions? Jim?
First of all, I apologize that you can't see me. For some reason on a tablet, when I put myself on, it doesn't allow me to turn the sound all the way down, even when I push it all the way down. And so it's distracting for Bill and I and who's ever sitting beside me. So I'm going to have to work on that. But it's something to do with the city site because I can do it for everything else. So I'm, being new to this, the buyout is, you're talking about the city buying it out?
well, the city, yes, they would take over ownership. It would be funded by FEMA.
Right. And what would be the cost to tear down the building?
I don't know.
Probably $100,000 maybe.
That's what we've been told.
Okay,
Sorry, Jim, just to be clear though, what we're talking about, FEMA would pay for, right? So the city wouldn't actually pay for it. FEMA would pay for it. And then it would be green space in perpetuity. But the city would own the green space.
because I was gonna say, if we had to pay for it, could we have a controlled burn, give the fire department practice? And they could come down pretty quick.
Any other thoughts or questions from anybody?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm really sorry for your trouble. I mean, it sounds like you've been incredible neighbors in our community, and this is a really tough situation. I'm glad to hear that your church is still meeting and coming together. I am going to vote no on this, and I just feel like that it's really important. Perpetuity is a really long time. And, I think we really need to think about the tax revenue of our downtown and taxable properties.
We preach about that all the time.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate what you're your community has done. You're part in our Montpelier community, but I just want to be transparent with you that I think I think we should vote no, because I think we need to preserve the opportunity for taxable revenue on that parcel for the future.
Thank you.
Okay, the chair would entertain a motion. And you could say you're voting no, or you could say you're voting yes, depending on how the motion is phrased. And if the motion is phrased to not purchase the property, then a yes vote would be not voting on the property. But I'll let someone frame the motion.
Yeah, I'm thoroughly confused at this point, so,
Okay.
but I'll try. I would make a motion that the council decide not to participate in the FEMA buyout for this parcel.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thanks for coming in. I support what other people have said.
Thank you.
All right. Item 8, city manager transition. And what we have in my one of my most recent weekly meetings with the city manager, I asked him, you know, we'd been talking about how the process could be managed, assuming that we would probably want to retain someone to manage this professionally. I asked them to put together an RFP, which we have before us, but and so technically the only thing that we would have to vote on tonight is to approve the RFP. There's obviously lots of other questions involved in this, including how internally within city government we want to manage this, whether we want to have, what kind of public input we want to have, what kind of city council participation we want to have in this process. We do not need to make those decisions tonight, but I really do think that we should, at a minimum, approve the RFP so we can get it started. Ben.
Do you need a motion to do that so then we can go into discussion?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I move that we approve the RFP.
Second.
Okay. All right. Did you want to start the discussion?
I think we should do this RFP. I think it's just personally, I think it's really important to professionalize the search, and there are people that do this for a living and do it well. And I think we should cast a wide net to try and find the best firm that we can that will deliver for our city. You know, I would also just say, I really appreciate that there are a lot of decisions that the council needs to make about what this process looks like. I think actually retaining a search professional that can describe that process to us, propose processes, is really an important thing to do. I would make the suggestion that we form a subcommittee of the council, if this is possible. If we form a subcommittee of the council of, I think, 3 members, 1 from each district, to work with Tanya, the Human Resources Director, to evaluate the responses to the RFP when they come in, make a recommendation to the full council. You know, I don't know whether that's narrowed down to 2 or 3 finalists, depending on how many people respond to the RFP. Certainly, the full council should have access to all of the responses to the RFP, but I think just for the process of moving things along and having a conversation, I think a subcommittee would be the way to go for that first pass.
Jim.
I would just like to change one part of that, Ben. I would just like to say, why don't we take the 3 most qualified people who know the most about this? Forget about 1 from each district. I mean, let's just pick the 3 of the best of us that have the expertise that maybe some of us don't. And if maybe there's a district that doesn't have somebody like that and a district has 2, I'd like the best people to be part of that subcommittee who are most knowledgeable about this. That's all.
Carrie.
Yeah, I just want to also speak in favor of this RFP process. I think we're not going to be able to do this well without some professional help. And when I read this RFP, it looks to me like it includes plenty of flexibility and opportunity and engagement with the city council so that whoever we hire is not going to be making decisions without us and is not going to be telling us what to do, but is going to be working with us and guiding us so that, I mean, this is going to have to be a process with a lot of engagement from city council and from the public and from the rest of the staff. And this RFP looks to me like we could get that. So I feel comfortable with it and I would like to approve it tonight.
Like Matt suggested, I also suggested this before to have a subcommittee from the city council to help the transition process plus the hiring. And my understanding was subcommittee will come up with the ideas with the support of city staff, like Bill just explained these things. So are we doing it like reverse, approving this plan first and having the subcommittee later? Because my experience is if we have a subcommittee first, decide that, then they can decide what to do with this proposal. Then they can bring us, yeah, we propose if they want to do changes on this proposal or other things, then city council can listen to their proposal and also they can give more details if they want to add. I agree with the idea, yeah, we should hire a search firm, but I'm just asking the process wise, because I hope the other version.
Well, the motion is to approve the RFP, so we can get that out and start finding the professional we're going to be working with quickly. And then Ben's made a suggestion to do a subcommittee, which I do not believe was part of the motion. It was an observation of what we should do. Well, let me just,
Sorry.
that's okay. Is that?
That's correct. Sorry to have confused the two things. I made a motion about approving the RFP, and then I'm happy later to make another motion about forming a subcommittee.
Okay. And Belen,
Just
yeah.
because I asked for a motion about this. That's what I am asking. I already asked a motion, right? Or did I ask for a motion or I sent the email proposing, let's create a subcommittee. And I think you and Bill said it will be on the agenda.
Right, so this is the item that's on the agenda, and the mayor asked you to prepare, but you could certainly make a different motion or vote against.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That's what I was trying to understand. Because some people reach out to me and they read this plan on the Times Argus and they are saying, why should we decide to go and accept this plan without public input? And I try to explain that this is not the city's plan because we haven't decided yet. So I think there's some kind of confusion because this information is already on a local newspaper. So that's what I was trying to understand.
I mean, I can't, the newspaper gets the same packet information that the council gets, and they wrote an article about it. You know, we haven't presumed anything. I just made a recommendation at the mayor's request. What I'd say is that I think public involvement is extremely important, as is staff involvement, everything else. And that is what the person would be to guide the council and say, how do you want to engage the public? How do you want to do this? And to get input as far as what are the qualities you're looking for? What is the job description? What does the ad look like? All those kind of things are decisions to be desired, but you need, I think, and most communities of our size use this to have someone who does this walk you through that. But the decisions still lie here and with the community, not, this is simply getting the ball rolling, not the final decision, in my opinion.
Yeah, I understand that, but I just want to clarify it for the public because they are asking me and I have a responsibility to bring those things here. Thank you.
Well, if you're telling people who ask you about it that no decisions have been made yet That's the right answer.
Yeah. I just want to confirm, yeah.
Yep.
Thanks, down here.
Yeah,
You cannot see. it.
Adrian.
I agree with Ben, I think, and I know Palin kind of like what you're thinking of in terms of the process, but when I did review the RFP, one of the pieces in here that I think what you're talking about is having the needs assessment and profile development, which is to engage with city elected and appointed leadership, key stakeholders, bringing in those key people as part of this process, and that is not going to be left out. That is part of this RFP. But what I like about this process is having what Ben said, professionalizing this process and having, someone who is outside guiding us, supporting us, telling us what type of committee we should form, like who should be involved, how many times should we meet, how many public meetings should we have in terms of like visioning and needs assessment and profile development and outlining that strategy. So I like having someone help us with that rather than us trying to figure it out on our own, which I think would be really time consuming and very stressful. So I will definitely support this RFP because I think it does allow for the flexibility to have that committee that we will need. And that's what the public is asking for, the public input, the profile development, the updated job description, the vision. That will happen. We will just have a professional helping us through that process. So I think this is a very good outline, and I will support this.
Sally, you have your hand up
Yeah,
too.
I agree with most of what's been said. I think this is, other than the actual decision for the city manager, we ultimately come to, this is, the next most important decision. And unless we can find a substantial, something substantial missing from this RFP, which I could not, and I greatly appreciate Bill's having put the effort into putting it together. It's as complete as I think it needs to be. And I think it gets the process started. So I support it as well.
Yes. Anything further? Any comments from members of the public before we proceed to a vote on this motion? Sorry, go ahead, Palin.
I just want to highlight that I support it too, but I had to ask a question that came to me. So I want to clarify for everyone who is listening to us and who will read the notes. So I just want to say that I hope people do not misunderstand. I agree with all of you because my name was came up a couple of times. That's why I felt I need to say something. Thanks.
The notes don't get that granular.
All right. If we're ready for a vote, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right. There we are. There's our first step done. Ben.
Well, I don't know if it's appropriate, but I was wondering if we could think about that next step about the subcommittee, or is that something that needs to be in a different meeting, agenda item, or?
Well, depending on who responds to the RFP, different consultants may have different visions for.
No, I think what I'm referring to, Jack, is the idea of the RFPs going out. When the RFPs come back, I think a subcommittee of the council should review those with Tanya, right? Review them in depth and ask questions, have conversations about them, and then make a recommendation to the full council along, share all the applications. But I think we need a small group to really dig in and digest them. And so what I'm suggesting now, I don't know if it's appropriate to do it now or not, but to form a subcommittee of the council that could work with Tanya to review the responses that we get to the RFP and select it. And that's not necessarily the same subcommittee that does all kinds of stuff later in the process. It's just to select the consultant that could help us.
And that's the motion that you made, right?
I'm making it right now. Yes.
Yep. Did you get that, John?
Vaguely like.
I move that we form a subcommittee of the council to work with Tanya to.
Sorry. Try it again.
Yep. I move that we form a subcommittee of the council consisting of 3 city council members to work with Tanya, the human resources director, that when the responses to the RFP come back, that we work to evaluate those responses and make a recommendation to the full council about a consultant to hire.
And is there a second? Any discussion on that? Yeah, Bill, Jim. sorry.
I would not like to be considered on that committee. I'm going to be taking on the negotiations with every negotiating team, and I got enough on my plate, and this is not my expertise. So I'm going to say right now, I do not want to be part of that subcommittee.
Noted.
Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Are there, next question is, are there volunteers to be on this RFP review committee? All right, I see 3 hands up.
You got your 3 districts then.
There we are. Is there a motion to approve?
Call it anything you want.
Palin?
When will I learn this, right? So can we call it like city council subcommittee instead of making it very limited, saying like
Sure.
whatever is the story? I
Sure.
forgot. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Is there a motion to appoint Ben, Palin, and Carrie to the subcommittee?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, moving right along. Item 9, action to implement the budget sprinkler tax credit. This you, Bill?
I'll just go quickly, unless people have more detailed questions. You may recall when we did the budget that we just passed, there were a couple of things, including reducing some of the sprinkler tax credits and increasing some of the ambulance fees and adding new fees that the budget was based on. And we wanted to make sure we took those actions as soon as possible so that we didn't forget them. And also particularly with the ambulance fees so that we could get advantage of this last quarter for billing of this fiscal year as well.
So for this sprinkler tax credit, that requires amending our ordinances.
Well, we have I believe it's a resolution.
Oh,
We
okay,
have a resolution, so I think you would just be amending the resolution to take out the commercial buildings that are required by law to have sprinklers, and it would just be those that either residential buildings or those that voluntarily put in sprinklers would get the credit.
okay. Carrie,
Can I just clarify that of the documents we've got here, we've got one that says sprinkler tax credit amendment red line edits, and that's like the track changes one. And then the next one, sprinkler tax credit amendment, that is what the final version would look like. Is that right? That's what it looks like. I just want to make sure that's
I'm
what I'm
looking at the experts, but I believe that's
Yeah.
correct.
I believe that's correct, Carrie.
I
We
believe
had
that's
we had
correct.
the final version ready to be signed.
Yeah, I presented a red line version so you could see the
Yeah.
changes. They were primarily related to the budget and there was just a few like minor cleanup items we corrected as well.
No. Do you want to do that?
Yeah. So I'll move that we accept, we adopt the resolution to amend. Or we adopt the resolution to amend?
Sure.
The
That we amend the
sprinkler tax
sprinkler.
credit.
Amend the sprinkler resolution.
Sprinkler credit resolution.
Yep.
That we amend the sprinkler credit resolution.
I move that we amend the sprinkler tax credit resolution.
Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, next up, ambulance fees. Are you here for this too, Sarah?
Wasn't planning to speak on it.
Get the fire chief here.
Okay, it's fire chief here.
But I think the short version again is we would be increasing our fees, ambulance fees to match those of the districts and also adding a fee for treatment, but not transport. So, we could, I'll let the chief explain that. He worked hard on this, so I'll give him his day.
Good evening, Derek Libby, Fire Chief. The packet that you received pretty well spells out where we stand today in table number 1. Our current charges, our neighboring EMS agencies and where their rates are. And this is really an effort, obviously, as we went through the budget process, but to reduce subsidizing the services from the tax base. Table 2 shows Medicare, Medicaid rates. So those would be write-offs from the billing. And then Table 3 counts of incidents. And then Table 4 is what we're asking is the proposed rate increases, which takes where we are today and brings us in line with the neighboring agencies and adds the no treatment transport call type, which effective July 1st, 2024, became eligible to recoup expenses that are borne to the cities on treating a patient, using durable goods, using personnel, using ambulances, and recovering some of that expense. You'll see the coverage for out of town or out of service communities. What that speaks to is when a career service or a volunteer service doesn't staff and relies on us to cover their call base that they're receiving support for and not able to staff. So we're going out of town and taking their call load, which impacts us by having to backfill the station with overtime personnel. So trying to reduce some of that subsidy on the city.
It's great. I think it's great that we're getting this done so fast so we can start collecting right away. Is there a motion?
Thank you for putting this together.
You're welcome.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. All right, next up, we have a proposal to conduct a housing needs assessment. Ben, I think you're up.
Well, actually, I think the motion was to ask the planning staff to go out and create a plan for doing the housing plan assessment, to go out and, see how long it would take if there was a consultant available to do it or how they wanted to do it. But to basically come back to us with a plan for conducting a housing needs assessment. And, I just think that this is really critical. I know that we've talked about the Country Club Road development at some point doing a housing needs assessment, or that maybe a developer could bear the cost of that. But I really think that we need to be thinking holistically about our community, about really understanding the data on our housing situation at a really granular level that looks citywide. And, I'll just say in my professional work, when I work with communities on community economic development and housing comes up, the first thing people ask is, do you have a housing needs assessment? And I just feel like if we're talking about the kinds of investment that we're going to be making in our community around housing, that this is the kind of the baseline that we can track all of that. And I think the sooner we have that information, the better. And so I'm hoping that you all agree to ask the planning staff to come up with a plan for doing a housing needs assessment within the next 4 months that we have the final product. And I also think that it's important that it follow best practices of what a housing needs assessment is. And that's why they included the Vermont Housing Needs Assessment Guide from Vermont Housing Finance Authority that supports a lot of this kind of work. So that's my motion. My motion is that we instruct planning staff to come up with a plan to conduct a housing needs assessment.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? So,
Ben, do you envision it covering the entire city?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's really.
I mean, it would be a substantial use in the growth center and so on at Country Club, but I think it's needed throughout
I
the
agree.
city to update. Okay, great.
and Carrie, I think I saw your hand. No. Any other members of the council? Steve?
Steve Whitaker. I didn't put him up to this, but I've been asking for that housing needs assessment for quite some time. And I'm glad to see the fresh member of the council push this forward, very well prepared and organized. But we cannot complete our phase 2 Country Club Road plan without the information from this needs assessment. How many units of what type and size are needed where? If we're going to try to invite options and survey the population of folks that have one or two people living in a big empty home downtown. We need to offer them some alternatives of would they be willing to move to Country Club Road and have a smaller unit? We can't really offer them transportation right now because our planning is so delayed. But what types of housing could be up there that would create trip generation compatible with the capacity or the limited capacity intersection requires that we carefully think through what areas are flood prone, what areas are good for infill, what can Country Club Road accommodate, and then offer those options to the public on what would you vote for in the way of size and cost in the way of housing options. Because without that information, we cannot complete the phase 2. Again, we can't do that in 6 weeks, but you need to be moving to get that underway. The fact that we have a very expensive planning department, Mike Miller costs us $160,000 a year with benefits, and that he's kept insisting we don't need a housing needs assessment, tells me what we do need is a housing needs assessment and not a Mike Miller.
I'm just going to respond to that. We don't need a housing needs assessment to do phase 2. That's just something Steve's made up. The reason Mike Miller has said we don't need a housing needs assessment is that it's for this project, is that we've looked at the county and statewide needs assessments, which have been done, and it's very clear we need tons of housing of all kinds. So no matter what we build, there's a need for it. So the presumption was not that it didn't need to be done, but that a developer would decide and propose to us what they would do for that project. To have a housing and needs assessment for the whole city is a whole different thing, and it will help us figure out our housing strategy and all those kind of things. It is absolutely not critical for phase 2, as Steve continually calls it, because we know we need big houses, we need small houses, we need multifamily, we need single family, we need all kinds. So whatever they do, we are drastically short on all of them. A housing needs assessment is not going to get into, interviewing people whether they want to move to new different, places. I mean, that's just fallacy. It will look at what is short, what do we need, what's the market there, what are they, that kind of thing. So, don't fall for the smoke screen. We should use this, and we will put together a plan, but we will be moving ahead. I'll be talking more about the process for phase 2 under my report later tonight. But so yes, I think those are two separate and completely distinct things.
So
I'm just wondering if we can add a time frame to the staff's preparation. I mean, is it in the motion?
It is, sorry. In the packet, I asked for them to come back to the next meeting with the plan for it. And, I honestly don't know how long it takes to do a housing needs assessment of this size. So I asked, to try and come up with a plan that they could get it done within 4 months. But, I think we see what they say, but I'm hoping that they can bring the plan back at the next meeting.
And I'll just note, we also don't have any funding for this project.
All right. Bill or Jim, sorry.
Did you read the one that was done in 2009, I think?
Jim, could you pull the microphone toward yourself, please?
So I just asking Ben if he'd read the 2009 one and what he felt about that.
I didn't read it in enough detail. I mean, I wouldn't want to comment on it. I think the conditions have changed quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the needs are very much kind of the same, but conditions and a lot of things have changed in 15 years. I just wondered if you had seen it and you found it deficient or something. So.
All right, are we ready for the vote? If so, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Moving along to item 12, establishing platform for districts on the city council webpage. And Councillor Cohn, that's your proposal.
All the public input we received from our District 2 residents show that they really want more connection, communication and transparency from the city. So I was just like working on it. Then I saw Bill and Kelly are going to that ISOMA conference. I said, let me check their agenda, right? What kind of things they are talking about this year for like a future foresight about municipal governments. Then I saw one specific session about how municipal governments can create more public engagement through their tools. And I thought, oh, how about we have like a specific one page for each district councilors. Now we have our face, right? And there is a link for people to go and see our email address. I thought maybe instead of just going to our email address, when they click our picture, they have a one page that we can put, oh, these are the initiatives I'm working on. These are the like inputs I receive from you. Very simple, but which will create transparency in a better way. That's why I just want to ask Kelly, Bill, and Evelyn if they have any ideas. And my proposal was, I am okay for them attend that session, come back and inform us, because probably they will be talking about these things and we can learn more. What are the plans? What are the future ideas? Then maybe after their presentation to the city council, we can decide how we want to move forward, because it is very important to me to communicate with my residents. As an individual, I try to, from Watch Forum, we have a kind of a district email list, but it is only like 80 people in that list. And in our district, 1,000 people live, right? And city page is the main source for them to learn anything about how we are doing on the city council, what we want to share with them, and we can decide what to include that page. That's why I just want to bring this issue for city council attention, and maybe we can consider something to do together. And again, I just want to wait until Bill and Kelly come from the ISOMA conference, because that's the topic they will discuss there. But I'm okay if they have other ideas for us to share tonight. I'm okay also to hear that. But my main goal is to improve the public engagement and transparency, which we have been talking for last 3 years since I was on the council. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. John, you have a comment?
Yeah, I would just, as the election administrator, advise you to be very careful about this, because when election season rolls around, if it looks like you're promoting yourself for election, I think using city resources or city time, that's for a lot of reasons, that's a big no-no. Including ones that could potentially get us in some trouble. So I would just say, whatever you have in mind, keep it broad, because when that season rolls around again, if you've got somebody up for re-election talking about how wonderful they are on the website, that gets us into some sketchy territory. That'd be my only recommendation.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's why I want to bring it to our attention, and we can discuss and decide. We can limit I don't know, we can talk about it. It's a good point, but my idea was not promoting ourselves. My idea was showing what we are doing as a city council and each city councilor. And
That's where I get work. Each city council is that it could, if you did it wrong, if you weren't careful with that, then something that each city councilor is doing looks like a city councilor pamphlet for re-election. So that's all I'm advising. So you might want to keep it broad.
Yeah.
So you don't want to walk, so you don't
yeah,
walk.
exactly. Yeah, that's why, again, that's why I just propose to discuss this and then hear from Evelyn, Bill, and Kelly, what they can bring to us. I am proposing the idea. I'm not proposing the details and the
So-
structure. So it will come from the professionals.
So we do look forward to chatting with our peers next week about some of this. I just note that, you know, we did make some reductions to our staff capacity to do this and also took away the Zen City platform. That is our prime transparency platform with surveys and projects where I think we'll be hearing later tonight that we're hoping to actually maintain that this year, but Kelly will talk to you about that later. But and if we can, that's a great robust thing. We could set up, you know, projects in the various districts. You know, this is what's going on in District 3, this is what's going on in District 2, you know, whether it's, we already do a lot of that sort of in the DPW news, but any other initiatives that are happening. So I think there's a lot of ways we could structure it and we already own for now the tools to do it. We just have to make sure we can actually have the capacity to do it and we keep that. Otherwise, we're going to be really struggling.
But Pelin, you're not asking us for us to take any action tonight. You're broaching the topic for future discussion.
So in my note to all the council, I put it that I wanna, if it is possible, to see a proposal from city staff after they attend the conference. So this is just an idea I just wanna discuss tonight.
Adrian, then Carrie. We gotta fix the
No.
setup.
Just as I was thinking about this in terms of staff capacity and how we've, and just the folks that are working on this, one of the ideas just to ponder in your heads is thinking about utilizing, and I don't know when this comes in through security or whatever, but the high school has a program called community-based learning. And if a student's interested in communications or website development or working with a city, this is an amazing opportunity for a high school student to come in and support the city functions. My daughter's participated in it with the hospital, and I think it would be just an amazing opportunity for a high school student to provide this support to the city on a very specific project. And they're very open to these types of ideas. So just to think about that during your planning session.
Carrie.
I'm just going to reiterate the staff capacity issue, just acknowledging that we have made changes to our staff such that we used to have a full-time communications coordinator who I would assume this would be a job that she might be able to take on. She's going to be doing at least 2 other jobs and already is doing a lot of that. And so we don't have that capacity because we made the decision in our budget process to reduce the staff that would work on this. So I think it would be great if there's creative ideas. I would love to have a better way to communicate. I'm all for that, but I just want to acknowledge that we may be limited in what we can do using city staff time.
Pelin.
That's why we will hear from them. Maybe they will say, yeah, we discussed these things. Unfortunately, we don't have capacity, or they will come. We discuss all these things. We can make it happen one thing. So that's why I am asking their input. I'm not just saying that. So let's think in a broader perspective and just hear from them first. If again, I'm all okay, whatever they will bring to us, but I just want to feel that I know all the restrictions and like all the obstacles. But when we want to think about in a visionary way, we cannot start with the obstacles, right? We can start what we can do. But again, whatever they will bring to us, whatever they will make about this proposal, I trust their expertise, so I'm okay with it. I just want to discuss these things and hear their perspective. That's all. Thanks.
You know, I just heard of this communications platform called Signal. Steve.
Steve Whitaker again. I want to remind you that we, a couple of years ago, put $50,000 in the budget to revamp our website, which is atrocious. It's a great impediment to public participation, to find things, to navigate the calendar, it's just a mess. And yet I tried to work and encourage our city clerk to be involved in that process, and he was not given opportunity to work and participate. Bad decisions were made. I don't know how much of the 50,000 got spent, but we don't have any in the budget now. But the platform that we're in, we need to get out of. And there are other opportunities. There are other website companies who could come in, be invited to put a proposal, and that would be the time. I don't think you could take a pig's ear and turn it into a silk purse by creating, I like the idea of each of our districts, but we also are talking about creating, redistricting to 6 districts and having 1 rep per district. There's some discussion.
I haven't heard that, but okay.
In any case, there are discussions that should be brought to bear in the light of how you design our website. We've got a lot of people who don't participate at all and who don't vote at all, and we need to get this ready before we spend a lot of time and energy on a pig's ear.
So, I didn't push to get in. I just passed on my comments, but I passed on some of your comments too, I think. Hope I did. I meant to.
And we still got the same old crap website.
So did anyone prevent you from participating, John?
No, early on, way back when, in the first version, I was involved, but not the most recent one.
Okay, it's 8:25. It's just about time for our break, so we'll come back in about 10 minutes. Get back to business. Item number 13. Special events policy. Who's presenting this? Chief? Who's doing it, or Kelly? Okay.
All right. So Kelly Murphy, Assistant City Manager. I've got Chief Nordenson here with me, and then on the line, we've got members from DPW, Kurt Modica, Public Works Director, and then Corey Line, our Project Management Director. And so what I'm going to do is just kind of tee things up. You have a draft policy in your packets, and then just provide a little bit of detail. And then the others are going to provide some context for you. So just in a thumbnail sketch, what we've done is we've reviewed the special events policy. And essentially what we're asking for is to be able to get reimbursement for charges associated with events. And so currently we do not do that. And there are some significant costs associated with it. So just, I'm going to run down through the policy to kind of highlight where we've made changes and what they are. And then just maybe share a few details on, the permits that we've received year over year for the past couple of years, as well as a few examples. So you can kind of get a sense of, what that might look like for different events. So just starting with the policy, we added special event to the purpose. And I can get into more detail here, but I'm just going to kind of roll through, assuming you've read it. We added special event public safety staff under definitions, as well as the application process and the public safety service assessment. In addition to that, we added a sentence or two to the exceptions. And really, those events are things that, are reoccurring annually. And what we run into year over year are there are some events that are reoccurring, but we still need an application on file so that we can kind of see the details of that event if there are things that have changed, but we wouldn't ask that those would come to council. The exception would be that they would just be approved administratively, and then the other pieces would apply. And then under process, we would be looking for an application fee associated with these events because it does take staff time to review the applications and kind of get them rolling and take a look at what their needs are. In addition to that, we would also be proposing to amend the policy so that that's position specific rather than name specific. And then moving on down the line to the real sort of heart of the topic, which is the reimbursement piece. We've got it outlined here. It kind of shares what the rationale is for some of the reimbursements and the cost calculations. And essentially what it is, charging for what it costs to run the events. There is a slight modification to the draft that you have in your packet that if we did bring this back to you in final form, I did notice that we have a little bit of cleanup to do around the payment provisions, just wanting to be consistent. Our intention with the payment provisions is to provide the entity with a bill following the event. So talk to them about what the event would require and then really give them the true cost once the event has been completed. And so those are the things that are in the policy. We can get into specific detail. But then the other thing that I do want to share is just a sense of, how many events are we doing, year over year. And so in fiscal year 24, we did 24 events. In fiscal 23, we did 20 events. In 25, so far, there's been about 30 events. 7 of those are associated with maintenance items, so they're not really events per se. So we're kind of really, in alignment in terms of the number of events that we do year over year. The 2 examples that I pulled together are 2 instances that we received recently as we've been reviewing this policy. There are a couple of permits that are headed your way that may be impacted, or you may decide what to do next with. But just in terms of these couple of events, one is Corporate Cup. So we did end up actually working with them to get reimbursement for the services rendered. And so that's a larger event. So that one ended up, just based on our asset management software, we were able to track costs of about $10,000 for that one event. A smaller event that we were looking at for the school was the Lantern Parade. And so we worked with them to look at the route to kind of establish, what we could do. Initially, we had approved their permit for sidewalks only, but they really were wanting to do a parade. And so we worked through and worked up an estimate for what it would cost to do that parade at night after hours, on a dark evening, worked out a route, and we determined that it would cost about $2,300. In that particular instance, they did not end up doing the parade as they had proposed. They ended up actually doing it here at the high school. And that event is pretty special if you get kiddos in school. I mean, it's pretty neat, those lanterns. But it is something that, while the event's really neat, there is cost associated with the event. And so really the policy issue here is, how we want to take on these events, like how we want to capture the costs associated with them. If, they should be absorbed by the city, or if we should be charging entities for the services rendered. And so if you have specific questions about events, any of the folks here can answer them. But with that, I'll kind of open it up to discussion and questions.
Anybody want to start? I'm looking over to you specifically, Adrian, because you're so hard to see.
I know. So I'm just going to think out loud for a second, because that's how I process. So I just want to make sure we think through this in terms of like balancing economic development, ensuring that, we bring in these events. Like I'm working, with a lot of our downtown partners to bring in events. During my report, I'll be talking about, the Muddy Onion. We have Mudfest. We had Winterfest. We didn't use Mudfest. Muddy Onion will use the road. I think they're using School Street. But I just want to think through the balance of, one of our economic goals is to bring in more events and ensure that we fill in our downtown businesses, our restaurants. Like, we want people to come out here. We want our downtown to thrive. And I think one of many strategies, right? It's a complex puzzle, is that we have events. We have these parades. We make our town just really exciting to live in. And, I think it's gonna have to strike a balance of like, how much do we charge them? Is like, what is the line of a deterrent that they don't do the event because it costs too much money. And so I think the lantern parade is interesting, like that's a lot of money for the elementary school. So that was clearly a deterrent. And so I think we would have to do, I don't know, I'm a data person, right? So thinking about just collecting some more information in terms of what is that baseline fee structure to still collect revenue because it is our services that we are providing. And what is that threshold for these, mostly nonprofits, schools, that they're willing to pay to support their event and to support our city while still bringing in revenue to our city. I think it's going to be an art and a little bit of a science, and we might not get it right the first time. And so I think for ourselves to come up with a figure based on some research and then be open to continuously evaluating that process to see if it's working, if it's not working, and then be open to readjusting those fees if all of a sudden we have no events in our town because our fees are too high. Like that's what I would want to avoid. Not saying that would happen, but I just want to make sure we're thinking through it very strategically.
If I can weigh in here, I mean, that is the policy right there. That is the policy question because we are incurring these costs. And, it wasn't that long ago, we were sitting in here sweating bullets over police overtime and DPW overtime and fire overtime. And so is it a smarter move for us to incur our costs to have 7 police officers on a Saturday at intersections blocking a road or to do investigations and responding to calls? Because when we're telling the chief, you got to cut back or we've got to cut back on overtime. So I think that, and I'm not saying we all agree, the events are part of what makes Montpelier great, but they come at a cost. And if the public is going to support those costs to our taxpayers on our budget, then I think we need to be clear about that. And I think we need to be clear that those are not necessarily fundamental operational costs of these departments. Maybe put a line in our budget that says this is special events money and we're willing to pay this much. And then when we're weighing the budget and we say, okay, we've got $40,000 or $50,000 in here for special events and we're trying to cut to a certain line, is it still worth having this money in there? Because it's in there now, it's in there intrinsically buried in these lines. And it's in addition to the actual dollar costs, it's also finding the people. So we're already short-staffed in some of our departments. We call people out to serve these events and then we need them to cover a shift the next night. And I'm like, I just worked all day Saturday at this parade. And the events are what makes us, don't get me wrong. I'm not in the events. It's just, this is one of those policy decisions that is you've got to tell us how to prioritize this and how, do we want to get revenue for it or not? And where are we? But at the end of the day, we're going to be looking at Kelly and Chief and everybody else saying, how can we respect? And
Yeah, if I
Jim, go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up on that. This isn't like a financial gain for us. This is literally just covering our costs. And each time I've been in the budget hearings with you folks for the last 2 years, I've heard, like we need to cut this overtime. I would love to, I want to hold these events. I've been holding these events for my entire career, but when I'm trying to balance, how do I pay for it? And I've already cut my staff by 1/3 of my coverage to save money. And now I'm prioritizing a special event that I'm mandating this coverage, but I'm going to run a shift with 1 person less. Just doesn't sit that well with me if I can't recoup the costs and then staff my shifts appropriately. And keep in mind, we have 14 staff members. If I need a full road closure from Elm Street to the State House, it's about 9 officers. That's the majority of my department. And then I'm still covering 24/7. So, this isn't just about the money. If I had more officers, then maybe it's more about the money, but there's a lot more to this than just, we want to have these events, but we also need to cover these costs and we also have to think about the wear and tear on the staff.
Jim.
I think you hit on an excellent word there called balance. And at the risk of throwing out another committee, we could have a subcommittee of 3 people and who look at individual events, because if it's only 24, okay, you get handed an event, you get told what the costs are, you get told, some events make people money. And I would have no problem with charging them you know, to say, hey, you're doing this to make money, what you're costing us money. Other events are like for the school, I mean, they don't have the money to do this, so the committee could look at each individual one and make recommendations to the rest of the council. Well, here's what we think about this one. They're not going to do it if we charge them this. Do we think it's something that people in the city would like? But on the other hand, if something's making somebody a lot of money, I don't have a problem with saying, hey, why aren't we getting a share? Because I think the concerns are, and I never thought of this when I was on the council, but Bill's right. I mean, we're always talking about cutting and costs and everything. And yet sometimes when we don't do things, we're driving up the cost for everybody, and not everybody goes to these events. So we're spending their money when it doesn't do anything for them. So I would think that, you know, case by case, I almost think is really the only fair way to do this. I know it's time consuming. I would volunteer to be on that committee because I think it's important enough to keep this going, but also, you know, like I say, not everybody cares about a lantern event. And if they're paying for it, they might say, gee, I want my money done in another way, or why don't you do this? That's something I would like. So I think it could be a case by case review. I don't know how it's going to, either way, if you don't do it by case, you're either going to have to figure out some sliding scale, or you're going to have to just say, we're going to have to charge everybody or nobody. And then we're right back where we are now. And I appreciate the work that you're doing on this, that you want to do on this, putting these costs together, because I think that's important to us. And that's my solution, but maybe nobody wants to do that solution. So I'm willing to hear other solutions.
Well, just to answer that question, the proposal does include a provision that someone who, that the city council has the authority to waive payment upon request.
Yeah, it's kind of
So something like that, yeah, but there would be coming to the whole city council, and who knows how often that would happen. But, you know, we're all responsible for the budget and what happens.
Kind of to go through the process a little bit, so I think this might be helpful for you. The permits come to our attention at the police department right now because of some shortages at City Hall. So we compile those, and what we can do for council is pretty simple. Every 2 weeks at our public safety team meeting, we review those, we make an assessment of need, and we also do what we think they need for safety, DPW, fire, police. We can assess the costs and we can present that to you at the time that we have these applications, and then ultimately you can decide. I mean, we're doing most of that work in advance anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. It's just, we're trying to find the safest way to hold as many events as cost effectively as possible. So we didn't say no to the lantern parade. We said, use the sidewalks and we can help you at the intersections with the staff that we have on duty. They asked for an alternative for that. They processed through that. They were going to pay. Then they changed at the last minute to go to the school. It had nothing to do with the fee structure. They were ready to pay for that because they thought it was important enough for them to be in the streets. Being in the streets with a bunch of little kids late at night during rush hour, if it doesn't give you guys a heart attack, it gives me a heart attack. So I'm going to put extra people. Those kids are the most important resource we have in our community. And if we're not protecting them, then what good are we as a police department? So there was a good number of police officers there, plus my shift, and going to make sure that they were safe. So that's what I have. And I know you had a question, so I kind of wanted to.
Yeah, I was going to call attention to the fact that this has a waiver provision in it, which I think, I think the way this is written now accomplishes the goal of trying to recoup reasonable costs and make exceptions for when we want to make exceptions. I think, Chief, I heard you suggesting that every event permit or every event could come to the city council and we could decide on each one of them. And I would rather not do that, actually. I would rather just hear about the people who want waivers of the fees.
You already do.
We do now.
You do.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah,
We can change that if you'd like.
yeah. Well, that's true. We do see them all on the
Yeah.
consent agenda, don't we? Yeah. But I think what you were describing was a more in-depth conversation about looking at each one and evaluating, do we want to charge them or not charge them? And I don't want us to do a process like that.
I assume that you would just modify the form, so part of it would be, this is the fee we anticipate charging for this event.
That's not a heavy lift at all. We do that every time we look at an event. Some that require little to nothing. Others, we're just helping at the crosswalk, which if we're available, we can do. And there's no charge, obviously. It gets into, some complicated parts when we have to set up like the vehicle barriers and things like that. If we have equipment and we don't use it and something bad happens, you look at New Orleans, they're getting sued, right? So I know that we have this equipment. I know that we have a real responsibility then to use it. And then we also have to, have a charge for some of that equipment because it doesn't have an endless lifespan, right? So we got a couple $100,000 in grants to buy that stuff. That money might not ever be there again. So how do we replace that and schedule it? Do we have the people that actually use it, pay for it? Do we budget for it? $200,000 in the capital plan paves a lot of stuff, right? Instead of having road barriers. So just trying to find creative ways to cover the cost of things that we as a capital city need. And just, you've asked us to think outside the box. We're thinking hard, so.
And even small things, we've had, it sounds silly, but we lose a lot of traffic cones, right? People put them out and they don't come back and, we have to replace them. And so,
And they're not cheap.
Yeah, do we put a little deposit on them? We gave you 20, we get 20 back, here's your deposit back, you don't think of those things, but it happens. And whether it's the event organizers or somebody else that grabbed them, you don't know, but they don't usually all make it back.
But Ben.
Yeah, I just think I appreciate the thoughtfulness that went into this. And, I would just say, I feel like events are so important to this city. And truthfully, I think we have a special responsibility, I think, as you've already acknowledged, as a capital city. So host events, particularly when I'm thinking of things in the State House lawn, or when we have these large protests, that's part of who the identity of this city is. I really do appreciate the idea of asking people who have the means to pay to be able to do it. But, I think about an event like the Lantern Parade or All Species Days. I don't know what their budget is for that, but, those are the events that are actually important to the identity of this community. And so it's a long way of saying, I think if we were to put in a policy that said, we're going to charge everybody, but then everyone's going to come to us and we have the ability to waive that fee. My fear would be that we would waive half the fees and then be kind of back in the same. I think we should just be honest with ourselves that if we really care about events, and we want people that don't have the means to pay for a fee, that we should budget for it, because it's part of what this city is. And so I'm all for asking, putting in a fee structure to ask people who can afford to pay. But, I think there are consequences too, to just saying, we're going to waive it on this one. We're going to waive it on this one. We need to be real about, if we're going to do this, we should pay for it.
So where are we with this right now? Are you asking the council to adopt this policy now? It kind of feels like we might want to have more of a public hearing to bring people out, but what do other people think?
If I
Go ahead,
might,
Kelly.
so, one of the things that we were looking for, from tonight's discussion was to determine whether or not you would like to consider the draft policy. So that we could, clean it up, bring it back to you in final form. This will require some ordinance changes. And so the next steps would be the first and second hearing, of those changes, to the parade sections specifically. So, we could do a couple of different things. I mean, we could, clean this up a little bit, bring it back and do the first hearing of the ordinance. So you could contemplate and decide at that point. Or, if you didn't want to do this policy, that's also part of the reason why we brought it, is because we want to make sure that if we're going to spend the time and the revisions for the ordinances, that it's something that you would like to do. And so it's really, what you want from us. I mean, it is an interesting policy question. And so we did want to bring it forward because, we are experiencing, volume in events. And it is kind of one of the things that, we may consider putting in a budget line, so it's just determining how you would like us to work with events going forward.
So, and then Adrian.
I recall that we wrung our hands about the 1% sales tax, thinking, that the business community would be up in arms. And in fact, they were okay with the 1%. They were unhappy with the process. So I say more process to get some public input and, really bet this with, get people's opinion and see how people feel about it. It may be that it's not a big problem. I have a feeling that we may not find out till we actually change the policy and it starts to happen. But I would vote for more process. So I guess that means your most recent suggestion is a draft and a hearing on the final version, and then decide.
Adrian?
Yeah, it's kind of exactly what I was thinking too. Like, I would like to get some input from Montpelier Alive and maybe talk to our customers that have had events and just, do a little bit more due diligence, talk to the customers, get their kind of, as I said, what is like their breaking point, just for research, and then look at other cities that are similar size to us and find out what their process is, maybe do a little bit of best practice research. Is it in a budget line in their city budget? What are their fee structures? What are their policies look like? I would like to learn a little bit more about what other cities like us do, and also talk to our customers just to ensure that we're hearing their voice and they're a part of this process, and just to inform our decisions.
Talking about like other capitals, because really no other city is like us in the fact that we're the capital, like Ben says.
Kelly.
Just a point of clarity. So we initially did have Montpelier Live take a look at the policy as we were starting to draft it. However, certainly we can have them take a look at it again. And we could also, when you say customers, do you mean like the business community? Or do you mean like the event folks, or so I just want to make sure we're casting a wide enough net for feedback. And then we certainly can bring back, some of the details on what other, options are out there.
I was thinking customers, like, we know who has events in our city, so you have a record of that.
Yep.
So I'm just thinking in my head in terms of like, benchmarking some of this data is, best practice could be just do a short survey, like what would, you've had an event in the past, you can ask them, I don't know how the survey would be off the top of my head, but something like, what could you pay? Are you a for-profit? Are you nonprofit? Are you a school? Right, start like segmenting that audience and collecting the data. So if it's a school and they, their ability to pay, $100, like that starts enabling us to create like a matrix of a fee schedule that would allow people to pay within their structure. So I'm thinking schools, nonprofit, for-profit, a state agency like the Governor's Cup. I think it's through the Department of Health.
Yeah, I think the governor's office, but we can certainly, we do have some metrics already just based on sort of the applications that we have, and we could definitely do a sample set of them.
Yeah, I'm not thinking like a huge exhaustive like thesis in college. I'm just a little bit of data just to inform our decision.
More back for sure. Thank you.
And we can certainly talk about this more, but the vast majority of our events really don't have that many for-profit events per se. I mean, if they are, they're usually more contained. I mean, we used to have a big one on Lang Street, but we don't anymore. I think you're thinking about from when you were on. They're usually either raising money for something or it's just a fun thing. They want to have a day. Even the Do Good Fest at National Life is a very expensive event for them. But it's all to raise money for good causes. And so, we would just be adding. It's actually a big cost for us. It's a lot of coverage for that event, but so it would be, again, it's a policy, so that would be $2,000 or $3,000 or $5,000. It doesn't get raised to whatever the cause is. And I think I think it's good to ask people, but I could also picture people saying, well, that's just going to come out of the money that's going to muscular dystrophy or the money that's going to, whatever, because we've got volunteers doing sign up and all this. So I think, it's important we say, it's also coming from the taxpayers to do this, and we're running out of money. So I don't know the answer. I wish I had the answer. I think we don't have a lot of events where someone is doing this and also making a profit that's requiring our thing. And those people are actually the ones that don't usually complain about paying. It's a cost of doing business.
So I just wanna echo everybody was saying about the public input. So it will be great like to see the results of, you already mentioned to us what you are planning, Kelly. And I was thinking if in the end we go and decide to have a kind of a budget line for this, how about you work with the grant committee, right? We have a grant committee. Would it be helpful just like visit their, I don't know, meetings, and maybe they can apply for something, but as far as I know, they need city support or city's name, right, to apply for the grants, or if you want to bring some kind of budget line to support this kind of events.
Are you suggesting, just for clarification, like at some sort of, pass through? So like if there were a grant that might be available for an entity to do an event for, a specific thing, that's what you would be thinking?
Yeah, I think similar, because we are talking about public input. You said you already talked to Montpelier Alive, right? How about going to grant committee meeting and talk and explain these things to them? I don't know, Adrian, I think you serve on that committee. I don't know what you think. It just came to my mind, like it might not happen now, but I think it is good to start the conversation with them, because people on that committee, they are already experienced, right? Finding funding. This is a great English lesson. Yeah, for different things.
I mean, I think the grant committee, we'd have to, the first thing that comes to my mind is like economic development funds, right? So thinking about economic development, community funds, what grants are out there. I feel like the grant world is like blowing up right now because there's just not any money in the world. And so, I can work with the grant committee to do initial research to just kind of scan the environment to see what is even available that would, fund the city to support, these events that I don't know what the answer is, but I can do some research.
Well, I don't hear anyone saying this is a big mistake to go down this road. I think people are generally thinking this on the right track, Ben.
Yeah, just I would just like to, maybe it's already in here and I missed it, but like when you come back, I would just love to know how much it costs a year to cover these events. And, in that way, I think if we do think about a budget line item, right, then that's just one more piece of information that we can use to think about the fee structure. So.
I just want to thank you for bringing this forward. This was never brought forward in my day on the council, and budgets are getting tighter. And yes, everything's for a good cause, but nothing's free. Somebody has to pay for it. Nothing is free. And if it's a good cause, but I'm going to speak for my age. When you get to my age, you don't go to a lot of events anymore. It's a hassle to deal with the traffic to get there. It's a hassle to stand around when you don't have a chair because maybe you got health problems or something. There's a lot of people that don't take part in these events who are ending up paying for them, who we're talking about, gee, they're getting squeezed like your neighbor does. Does he go to these events? Well, if he doesn't, He's paying for them. And so I just want us to remember, nothing's free. Somebody pays for it. And we want to, I'd like to hear public opinion on this, and because it is costing us and we're always looking for ways to cut because everybody's always screaming at us. Way back in my time too, when I was on the council, the budget is always a big deal in this town. And I don't think that's ever going to change.
I think you've got your direction. Thanks, Kelly. Thanks, Chief. All right, next up, item 14, state ethics law. All right.
Possible. That is better, I think, for folks. That's okay. We're just going to cruise on through this. So essentially, what we, want and need to do is just kind of bring to you the sort of resulting impact of Act 171, the Ethics Commission and municipal ethics. And so really what this boils down to is requesting something from you, which is to consider an ordinance for compliance, but then also to have you take the training. And so I'm just going to kind of go through things pretty quickly because it's pretty self-explanatory in terms of, what is in this code of ethics. This code does, supersede what we did have in place. We have posted it. We've, sort of done the checklist in terms of, what needs to be in place, to follow this guidance. And so, we've done just that. But really the key objective is to ensure transparency, accountability, integrity, and local government operations. So just moving on down the line here, this just gets into some of the definitions, just, who really does this apply to? And so municipal officers, so includes bodies like this one. It also includes, our city staff, our leadership. And so these are the core provisions. And so, these are things that you've seen before. These are consistent with what our prior policy did have in place. And so I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm just going to kind of click through each of these slides. But, they include things like no personal or financial gain or limitations on gifts or unauthorized commitments, that sort of thing. And so then just getting into sort of the role of the Ethics Commission in all this, is really to provide guidance and training. We actually have reached out to the Ethics Commission already, on a few things that we've, wondered about and got some really good feedback from them just to make sure that, things are above board. So we have definitely utilized the commission. And so this is a list of action items. And so just to kind of, cruise through this, we needed to appoint an ethics liaison. We did this on the 26th of January. So that's already been done. So it's the city manager or designee at this point. We could change that, but just so you're aware, we've done that. We needed to post the code on the website. We've done that. The training requirement, city staff has completed this training requirement. I hope that you all will complete the training requirement.
I have completed it.
Jack's completed the training requirement. And then if you can just send me sort of your completion of that, then I can keep track of it. Because there is a requirement to, do it within 120 days. Of this sort of January effective date, and then every 3 years thereafter. And so we are keeping a record per the guidance that's in this act. And so then just getting into the model ordinance, which you do have in your packet. If this seems reasonable, we'll bring it forward for public hearings, much like the last topic. We wanted to kind of gauge where you were, if you wanted to see changes or not. This is pretty standard. This is the model VLCT policy, so it's been vetted from and through them for compliance specifically, but the purpose is to provide a procedure for investigation and enforcement and the like, and also identifies, how complaints will be handled. And then, as I mentioned, the next step would be really advancing this particular ordinance as you have in your packet onto the next item, which would be for the first public hearing to adopt. And so that's kind of a speedy way of cruising through this. But if you have specific questions, I'm happy to take them. The ordinance is in your packet in draft form. It's pretty standard and straight ahead. But again, if you've got anything for me, please let me know.
I can tell you, I did the training Sunday morning. It was on video. It takes about 45 minutes. It's very straightforward. And then there's a little quiz at the end. And you click through and then they email you your certificate.
That was my question, was what does this take to get the training? Okay.
And this is, I think the reason we're doing this is it is new this year. It was new law from the legislature last year. We've always had, since 99, we've had our own ethics policy, but now, and we were initially going to do it in January and then said, let's just wait until March when we have a new council and they're the people that will be taking it. So that's why, we're getting it now, but you do need to do the training as we all do.
Bill, do you know, does the legislature pass this in Act 171, but do they hold themselves to the same standard of training?
I'm not sure they do. And, it was a kind of interesting thing about their imposition on municipal procedures versus their own, but there is a process in place for state employees. So it is mirrored that the State Ethics Commission does deal with those. So it was meant to do that, but there was, I could go into all of that, but I do think there's now municipal representation on the Ethics Commission, which there was not. So, certainly being ethical and following the rules is important. So, their wisdom, they decided to do it.
Australian and state. I am talking to, I don't know what can I do more. So there are both for municipal ethics training, then there's a state ethics training. So there must be one for them too. Which is
I don't
the
know if
thing.
the legislators, I think that was.
No. We'll check the.
I think they actually do have training. I've been in the building the last couple of years when they've had to break to go to these sessions. So I don't know exactly what they are, but I think they do have something they have to go through. So, yeah, and I've been in touch with the State Ethics Commission and with the city clerk because according to the way it's defined, all the members of the Board of Abatement and Board of Civil Authority are also subject to this, including to the training requirement. So we're going to try to set up a training when we do when you have an upcoming Board of Abatement meeting, which is going to be soonish. And
I'm just about to send them another link to the online system.
oh, okay, well, either way, yeah.
All of it.
Yeah, we can tell anyone who doesn't want to sit in the room with your other JPs, do this, but I was just thinking that if we get people coming into a room to do ear abatements, they're kind of a captive audience. Yep. All right. Ready to move along? All right.
like to raise an issue you may not be aware of, but relates to this. This new ethics framework, I believe would supersede any existing policy. I have filed some months ago a complaint with the city or with the police chief asking for a referral for two of his officers, the deputy chief and Officer Matthews, to be referred to the Vermont Public Safety Council, the Criminal Justice Council, for lying on sworn statements. And I got a response back from the chief that, oh, our policy says that those have to be filed within 90 days or they don't get, which to me is absolutely absurd. And I think we, at a future meeting, need to have a discussion about police oversight and accountability. But the idea that you could sweep something under the rug because 90 days had passed when it's as serious as an officer lying on sworn statements that get filed with the judge is absurd. And where that policy came from, or had the council even had awareness of that policy, is of interest. But I'm asking, does this ethics policy, you've done the training, that will supersede and debunk the nonsense that I was responded to with?
What I would say is that the law requires that any municipality can adopt its own policy, which can be no less protective than the state policy.
No less protective.
We can't have a watered down set of policies that don't meet.
Okay, and this will work retroactively as well. It's not just events going forward.
No, I don't understand that question, but
I mean,
Why would it?
I consider my complaint still valid against the two lying officers. And it kind of went into limbo when the chief said, oh, 90 days lapsed, so I don't have to refer this to the Criminal Justice Council.
well, without knowing anything about what happened, what I would say is that if the legislature adopted a law that was effective on January 1st, 2025, it does not apply to conduct that occurred before that. That's my opinion without,
Yeah, it makes no sense because you apparently no one on this council is aware that that policy existed, that we don't accept complaints after 90 days. You know, where did that policy come from?
Yeah, this doesn't have anything to do with state ethics.
yeah, we can move on.
So you're going to sweep it under the rug?
No, I'm going to move on to our next agenda item.
Well, will you commit to taking this up again?
No?
You farce.
All right. The last scheduled item we have is briefing on union negotiations and contracts, and I assume we're going to go into executive session for that. So why don't we go through the other items and then go into executive session?
I have a comment on that topic before you go into executive session. Or are you going to jump to other? On the contracts, I don't believe, Steve Whitaker again, the experience, the team that has been working up with Fraser, I think we need some outside expertise to negotiate these contracts. This embedded inflation of our costs has got to stop, and the current staff, as well-meaning as they might be with Fraser recusing himself, is not up to the task of negotiating these contracts, and that you need to consider having some expertise.
You're out of order at this point. The time will come when the contracts come before the council for action. And any comments that members of the public want to make about the contracts can be heard at that time.
It's too late to have it.
Now, it's straight. I think that I sent something out to the to respond to something in the council earlier today that said we can take this up in other business.
Yeah, this is about the retreat dates.
Was that
Yeah, I'll
okay?
get that on my list.
Okay. So why don't we move to that, to other business and retreat dates? Oh, yes. It was about the timing of council meetings. So we can talk about that right now. We've been told that the schools need us to be out of this room and out of the building by 10 o'clock. We're doing pretty well tonight. We're not going to have a problem getting out of the building tonight, but a lot of nights we are. So one idea I thought was we could maybe start at 6 o'clock. I think that's not going to work for all the members of the council. So we can't do that. We can try to discipline ourselves to make the meetings run shorter. As I said to people, no cushions on chairs. If you want to sit on something soft, wrap the meeting up earlier and go home and sit on something soft at home. But we might find that this room isn't going to work. The high school isn't going to work for us because it's reliably, we can count on going longer than 10 o'clock a lot of times. So we could do senior center instead. Anyone? Any other thoughts, Ben?
I just two. One, I find with meetings and agenda items, if you put, I don't know if you've tried this before, but like putting time limits or time frames, at least to help us gauge how we're doing. And then, at the risk of being pedantic, I'm thinking of Mark Twain. If I'd had more time, I would have written you a shorter letter, right? I think there's something to be said for knowing that we are going to turn into pumpkins at 10 o'clock. And, for 3.5 hours is a lot of time, and I think we should try to be disciplined.
There was a time years ago where the council not only had estimated times, but they actually had start times next to each item. And then, people would show up thinking it was going to be at 7:30 and they'd wait until 9:30, or they'd show up thinking it was going to be at 8 and they realized, oh, we got to it early. But I do think it's worth a shot, Palin.
So maybe we can just put that note when we announce the meeting, and everybody, I'm talking about the public, they will know that we have to leave this room at 10, and they will be more flexible when we say, okay, thank you for your input, but we need to move the second item. And sometimes we just say, oh, let's put this 2 items for next agenda, like something like that. I think it will work. And if it is really, if we need to meet at 6, and if we know this like really beforehand, I'm happy to arrange my schedule. But let's keep it at 6:30 and let the public that we need to leave this room at 10, and we have 3.5 hours, to finish our meeting.
Jim.
Well, I'm going to bring some history on this. This was always talked about, and it never works that way. You don't know how many people are going to come in. You really can't say that, well, I'm sorry, we're into the line. Those 6 of you have been in line waiting here all night. We just can't have you speak because that's the way it is. It just doesn't work. It never worked. I mean, Bill, I'm sure can back me up on this. We talked about that. We used to have meetings sometimes that went to 1:30, 2 in the morning. And we just had to tough it out. Basically, that's kind of what you sign up for. And I don't like moving things because then you're always moving something to other meetings. It's delaying those things for whoever wants to come. They're sitting there and they go, gee, I came down for this and now you're telling me you're moving it. And I sat here all night. It's not fair to the public. I mean, if it's not something you can do on your time, then maybe you're not in the right position.
Well, the issue is the room, not the people here willing to do it. I think the issue is
let's get another room.
Right.
But I mean,
that's the question.
But to really say, let's try to limit it to certain times, all the agenda items, it just never works that way. You're going to run into issues. Saw it all my 12 years. We always were trying to cut down the time, and it was hard.
I would just say, I think we should move our location. I don't think it's fair to the school staff custodian to just sit here and wait for us till 10. I mean, they said 10, but what if our meeting goes to 10:30, 11? It's not fair for the school district staff to wait for us. So I would propose another location. I mean, the senior center we've met and it's fine. Not great, but it works.
I'm in favor of all of the above. So maybe we move to the senior center, but we also really think about how we can try to be done at a reasonable time. And Adrian had a suggestion, I think at one point, to kind of collectively look at the agenda after general businesses and appearances and decide about how much time we want to spend on each item. I think that's something we could try. I think there's a lot of different things that we could try. I don't believe anybody gets good work done after 4, 5, 6 hours of a meeting. That's not a responsible way to run a city. So, I recognize sometimes things just go late and we have no control over it. But so I think we can do both. I think there are things we can do to try to tighten up our meetings, but we should also move to the senior center.
Okay. So you have anything to add? You don't have to. No.
And we're on 29 minutes and counting.
All right, great. We are over to the senior center.
Also,
Yeah.
we are always flexible, so we always adjust our time if we need to start early, leave late. So there was no issue before. I think it's more about the usage of this place. That's the thing, yeah. Everybody's ready to be flexible.
I like this room in certain configurations, but yeah.
And we have 29 minutes left.
Yep. All right.
So we've decided to move to the senior center. Right?
Yes.
Better, electricity over there, though, it's really hard to.
We'll try to figure that out.
Yep.
I agree. It's not, this room is much better, but.
All right. City council reports. Doyle.
I just want to thank the planning commission for their work on the city plan. I know some of us went to the meeting and they just worked really hard on it. It was really exciting to hear the enthusiasm for housing in this town, and hope we can work with them to make that happen.
Councilor Cohn.
Pass, thank you.
Councilor Sheridan. Alfano and Brown.
I'm just going to echo about the city plan work, and that the housing committee did a lot of work on creating their own recommendations and their own input and submitted that to the planning commission. I don't know if there's a way to see the comments, or if that's publicly available, but there was a ton of work done in there.
I'll be very fast. So I just want everyone to mark their calendars for April 25th to 27th. As I mentioned earlier, economic development in our city, we're trying to create more events and with partnership with Montpelier Alive and Onion River Outdoors. They will have their Muddy Onion Gravel Grinder on Saturday, and there'll be a Gear Makers Festival and a nature walk to bring folks into town. And then Sunday, this is really fun for folks that like to run in the mud. There will be a Mucker Mud Run that is being hosted by the Green Mountain Community Fitness, and it'll be through Hubbard Park. So we're working with Alec and his crew to make sure that it is safe to run through the park. There'll be a 5K, there'll be stuff for kids, really trying to bring folks into town. Mark your calendars and show up for that weekend.
All right, mayor's report. I don't have very much. I will say that we are getting a lot to communication a couple of weeks ago from the aide to the mayor of a city in Quebec, saying that they resent what the president has been saying about Canada becoming a 51st state, and requesting my support in issuing a statement that says he doesn't speak for us here in Montpelier, and I responded affirmatively right away, and I will be doing something about that. I also was interviewed beginning of last week, I think, for a Canadian show called This Hour Has 22 Minutes. And again, it was a lot talking about the relationship between the United States and Vermont in particular, and Canada. And again, we have very positive relations with Canada. Many people here in Vermont have family up in Canada, and as I say, that guy doesn't speak for me, and I don't think he speaks for most of the city. And I think that's it for me. City clerk's report.
Just really fast, in case anyone is curious about the presidential order that was passed regarding that included non-citizen voting, stopping non-citizen voting. I'm losing my vocabulary. It's so late here. I'm aware of it. I'm looking into it with the other towns that do non-citizen voting. I'll keep everybody up to date. Early glance is that it shouldn't be a problem for us, but I don't want to say anything definitively yet, but it is on my radar.
Great. City manager.
Okay, I got a few things from general business that I will just put in the weekly memo in the interest of time. One thing I did want to say, last year in the congressionally directed spending, we were awarded $2.5 million for water line improvement and $1.5 million to upgrade, to elevate the Elm Street housing and put district heat in the budget, Federal Budget Act. That all went away. So that money, but we will be resubmitting those. We've been asked by our delegation to ask for those. So we're going to ask for the same things again, but that was particularly with the water lines, was a really big disappointment. Very minor detail, just a protocol thing from now on is anything that you would normally include me on an email, please also include Kelly. So it's part of our transition thing. We talked earlier about the Country Club Road meeting date. So at our next meeting, we will be talking about a process for looking at phasing. And I think we'll probably be suggesting that we hold a special workshop meeting with the VHB person to work that through to come up with a plan that the council can approve for grant applications and moving forward. It is not necessarily the final plan, but that rather than try to do it in one of these meetings. So that is coming. And then lastly, you did want to have a retreat. I've emailed you the facilitator is ready, willing, and able. She just did one with our staff last week. And just looking at Wednesdays on your norm night, she has for April 16, April 30, and May 7 available. So I'm just throwing it out.
They all work for me. Yeah.
So we can just start moving on the things we want to do. But yeah, I'm okay with everything.
I would also rather do it sooner than later. Yeah. So the 16th would work for me.
Yeah.
Whatever that Wednesday.
Yep, 16. Sally, you're checking your calendar right now.
It's fine. Okay, great. And maybe one of the others could be the Country Club Road work session.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all I have.
All right. Now we need to go into executive session. What do you think? Move to a conference room over there so that we
Started.
So that
we started.
yeah, so we're out of this room so it can be cleaned up. All right. Let's do that. We do need that, yes. I think this is a two motion one. So the chair would entertain a motion that the council find that premature disclosure of the content of the meeting would put the city at a decided disadvantage in contract negotiations. Someone needs to say so moved.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now the chair would entertain a motion to go into executive session.
Executive session.
Yeah, Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
You
All
just
right.
want- And you just want to make clear, you will not be taking action when you come out, because probably all this will be shut down.
Correct, yes, and the motion includes the city manager and assistant city manager would be joining us, I assume?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay,